Chapter 4032. She stuffed two into the arms of the exasperated Emolien, while clattering ahead with one in her arms. She muttered, "So baffling. Of course it was ridiculous." Could it be that she had been thinking about the blue-eyed three-headed dog recently, so everyone looked like a three-headed dog to her? Otherwise, why would she suddenly think that these three little puppies seemed to be hinting something to her? She suddenly stopped in her tracks and turned around to walk towards the signboard. Emolien was startled and naturally followed her. She looked at her wife helplessly and said, "Jojo, what's wrong? What was going on?" Why did his wife suddenly have a problem with a signboard? Arbor suddenly scratched the little white puppy's fur and pointed at the three-headed dog on the signboard. "Is that your ancestor?" The little puppy in her arms immediately shook its little head vigorously. The two in Emolien's arms also shook their heads vigorously. The three little heads shook at the same time. The rhythm and frequency were really similar. Arbor hesitated for a moment and suddenly asked on a whim, "Is that you?" Then, the crowd saw a scene that made them not know whether to laugh or cry. The three little puppies nodded their little heads furiously and barked, "Woof, woof, woof." The three heads nodded as if they wanted to fall off at the same time. "Hey!" These three little puppies nodded. "What do you mean? What can they mean?" They said that the three-headed dog on the signboard is the three of them. Ah ha ha ha. A few onlookers couldn't help but laugh. Then, there was a sound of laughter. Ah ha 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 ha. Then, there was a mocking laugh from behind the signboard. Xiao Mu poked her head out while hugging the cute little puppy. She saw Lin Miao walking over from behind the signboard while pulling along an unfamiliar girl. It looked like they had just finished eating at the restaurant behind and were coming over to watch the show. Behind the two of them was an 18-year-old pretty girl. Arbor recognized her at a glance. It was the beloved disciple of He-One from the Medicine King Island, Enai Hanji, whom he had met in the mountains behind the royal school. Enai Hanji also saw Arbor at a glance. Thinking of how she had carelessly added a few strokes to the revival Bodhi grass, she knew that the girl in front of her would definitely suffer a lot. She couldn't help but feel a little proud in her heart. "Humph, who asked you to disrespect the people of the island of the Medicine King?" Now that she looked at Arbor, she really didn't like it. He boasted shamelessly that he could refine the soul-returning pill, but in the end, didn't he still have to rely on the Bodhi soul-returning pill's pill formula given by his master to gather all the ingredients? Others might not know who had issued the warrant for the blue-eyed Cerberus, but Enai Hanji knew better than anyone else. Apart from Prince Mo, who was able to gather the power of the entire nation, who else would be able to afford 100 million spirit coins? She was truly a shameless seductress. She could actually make the crown prince disregard his reputation to help her. Enai Hanji's eyes lit up with a trace of anger. These two people dared to give her and her master the cold shoulder, so they should be prepared to die. That Prince Mo actually dared to look down on her. Humph, a little crown prince of the divine land dared to look down on the Medicine King Island. What a joke! She didn't like him. Enai Hanji wouldn't want a married man even if he was given to her. The man that she, Enai Hanji, liked must be the most outstanding man in the world. Chapter 4033. Oh, what am I seeing? Lin Miaoer laughed so hard that tears were about to fall out. What a joke! Lin Miaoer pretended to wipe away the non-existent tears at the corners of her eyes. Look! Miss Chow is talking to three little grass dogs? Do you really think that these three little dogs are ancient ferocious beasts? Ha 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 ha. When Lin Miaoer laughed like this, the surrounding onlookers also wanted to laugh. However, they restrained themselves, especially when they saw the little stoic's expressionless face. For some reason, they felt like they couldn't continue laughing. They felt like they were laughing like idiots. The girl with icy skin and snow-white bones in front of them had a stoic face and didn't give them any response at all for a long time. Arbor raised her hand to stroke the little puppy's fur. Meanwhile, the little puppy in her arms bared its teeth at Lin Miaoer and made a lunging posture. Humph! Lin Miaoer harumphed coldly and glanced disapprovingly at the three little puppies. She mocked, "Miss Chow, can't be that you really believe these three little mongrel dogs, right? They think that because there are three heads drawn on the painting, ha ha ha, they're the three of them?" At this point, Lin Meower started jeering loudly and wantonly again. Ha ha ha, that's really too funny. They're three-headed dogs, not three dogs. The surrounding onlookers couldn't help but want to laugh again, but they glanced at the still expressionless Sir Jojo. They couldn't laugh again for some reason. Emolien knitted her brows and walked up to pull her wifey over. Just as she was about to speak, Arbor pulled her hand to stop her. Jojo's Lotus was simply lowering her status by talking to them. The best way was to let these women perform a one-man show on their own. She couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. She was standing here talking to her little puppies. Why did she need these irrelevant people to express their opinions? She was simply crazy. Arbor raised her hand, and the painting that had been ripped apart by the three little puppies floated into her hand. Arbor scratched the puppy's head and asked again with a serious face, "Was it you?" Woof, 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 woof. The three puppies nodded their heads in unison, with an expression that said, "Yes, yes, yes, please praise me." Emolien glanced at his wife in amusement and held her little hand. Is it true? If these three puppies were really the Cerberus, then it would be a huge joke. Husband, don't forget to pay me 100 million spirit coins. Emolien. Wife, my spirit coins are all yours. Arbor thought about it and agreed. He glanced at him regretfully and said, It's rare that I want to give away a wave of wealth, but I can't. Emolien couldn't help but nod. That's true. What else could he say? Wasn't it all because his wife was awesome? Although these three little puppies were completely different from the mighty and domineering Cerberus, but he felt that these three puppies didn't need to lie to them. Moreover, in retrospect, the things that these three puppies had done were all very strange. For example, they liked to gnaw on divine beasts and holy beasts, and they didn't eat elixirs that weren't divine grade or above. He remembered that when the three puppies were fighting the two-headed dragon on Mount Daizong, they tore off the scales and barbs on the holy beast's neck with one bite. After that, these three puppies' behavior was never normal. Chapter 40-34. Other people didn't know how extraordinary these three puppies were, but as their master, the little girl was naturally well aware of their abilities. At this time, she met Emolien's eyes, and both of them saw confirmation in each other's eyes. These three puppies most likely weren't lying to them. They were probably really the ancient, vicious, three-headed dog. But Lin Meower's ridicule seemed to have some truth to it. They had never seen a three-headed dog turn into a three-headed dog before. This was too bizarre. Arbor glanced at the puppy in her arms and patted its head. Then why didn't you say anything when we issued the arrest warrant earlier? Woof, woof. The puppy looked at its little master in bewilderment. Arbor also felt that her question was a bit funny. At that time, she and Emolien were discussing how to issue the arrest warrant in Joe City. So these three puppies weren't with her. If it weren't for the fact that they could see arrest warrants everywhere on the streets today, these three puppies would probably still be in the dark. They were actually wanted by their master. Xiao Mu covered her small face with her hand, suddenly at a loss for words. How should she put it? This really was a huge misunderstanding. The little stoic petted the puppy's chubby body before turning around to pull Emolien to the side of the plaza, as if no one else was around. There were many restaurants and tea houses here, so they could just pick one to eat first. Besides, there were too many people here, so it wasn't convenient for her to communicate with the puppies. Or when Lin Meower saw that the husband and wife pair didn't pay any attention to her, she directly walked around them to leave. She instantly felt a bit angry, and she didn't know where her courage came from, but she suddenly reached out to block Arbor's path. Wait. Emolien's cold and heavy eyes swept over Lin Meower's face. Arbor hooked her arm around her husband's arm and glanced at her with a bored expression. She said indifferently, What? Do you want to lose a few more teeth? Or do you not want your face anymore? Lin Meower's face stiffened. Do you really think your Lin family can do whatever you want in the sovereign capital? Arbor reprimanded mercilessly. You can try. You! Meower. The girl on the side hastily grabbed her and curtsied. Crown Princess, please don't be angry. Meower is only joking with you. What's so funny? Arbor's voice was cold as she swept her gaze around her. Funny? Everyone shook their heads in unison. What was so funny about this? Now, everyone had the strange illusion that they were about to get involved in the fun. What does it have to do with you whether my 3 little dogs are Cerberus or not? What a bunch of weird women. What a bunch of weird women. You're lying. Lin Muir angrily flung her companion's hand away. Gu Isun bit her lip and looked helplessly at the angry Lin Muir. She then looked back at Miss Ni Hanji from Medicine King Island as if asking for help. Miss Ni had a high status in the Lin family. As long as she was willing to say a word, Muir probably wouldn't clash with the crown princess. But would Ni Hanji dissuade her? She watched gleefully, wishing nothing more than to see Xiao Mu suffer a setback. Even if Lin Muir didn't start a fight, she would still say a few words and let them fight. Moreover, now that Lin Muir had stepped forward to pick a fight with Arbor, why would she stop her? Do you dare to compete? Chapter 40-35. Compete? Arbor stared strangely at the woman in front of him. Hadn't this woman received enough of a lesson? Did she want to seek her own suffering again? The little stoic was disinterested and was about to flatly refuse this person's request. Suddenly, Lin Muir raised her hand. Bang! After a loud noise, panicked cries came from the crowd. At the same time, everyone hurriedly retreated in a flurry. A huge black dog descended from the sky in front of Xiao Mu. Its 4 thick and solid paws were clawing at the ground as drool dripped from its mouth. It was currently staring fixedly at Xiao Mu with a pair of small eyes that were like ice shards. Emolien reflexively pulled his wife into his arms and narrowed his eyes, fury flitting through them. You're courting death. His tone was abnormally icy, and when he stared at Lin Muir, the latter unexpectedly shuddered. When Ni Hanji saw this, she stepped forward and stood next to Lin Muir with a grin. What does your highness the crown prince mean? Miss Lin merely wants to follow the crown princess's 3-headed dogs. She sneered and disdainfully swept her gaze over the 3 small dogs. She continued, It's just a competition. How is this enough to anger the crown princess? Could it be that you don't dare to compete? Yo yo yo, it's so lively. And Wu Shuang's voice came from afar. Arbor turned around and sure enough, he saw a fiery red figure squeezing through the crowd and running over like a wisp of smoke. Oh my, such a big dog. Who are you trying to scare here? And Wu Shuang's gaze swept around and finally landed on Lin Muir, who had an unsightly expression. She giggled and said, Why is it you again? What, this commandery princess didn't teach you enough last time. Now that your teeth are fixed, you're making a ruckus on the streets again? When Lin Muir saw in Wu Shuang's unrestrained manner, she felt her teeth ache for no reason. She herself didn't realize that she had involuntarily taken 2 steps back. He stared at Wu Shuang warily and sneered, Don't slander me. Who is causing trouble on the streets? Lin Muir said loudly, I just came to. She took a deep breath and looked at Arbor angrily. How about it? Do you dare to compete with me? Didn't you say that these 3 puppies are Cerberus? Why don't we let them compete? Right and wrong we will know once we compare them. Meow. Gu Isun tugged at her sleeve. She wanted to advise her not to cause any more trouble. However, how could Lin Muir listen to her? She flung her hand away. In addition, the troublemaker Ni Hanji chuckled. Could it be that the crown princess is afraid of losing? Are you weak now? Lin Muir became even more excited. Today, she was going to expose this woman's lies. Xiao Mu rolled her eyes and glanced at Lin Muir in utter boredom. The 3 puppies beside her could even bite a holy beast to death. It didn't matter if they were Cerberus or not. This was the truth. The giant black dog that Lin Muir summoned was just a spiritual beast. It wasn't even at the level of a divine beast. How could it run up to its death? It was either crazy or stupid. Where are the crown princess guards? Prince Mo couldn't help but laugh. Several figures suddenly appeared beside Arbor. Arbor pointed impatiently. So long-winded. Throw them into the capital's prison and lock them up for 3 to 5 days. Chapter 40-36. Lin Muir, Gu Isun, and even Ni Hanji, who was watching from the side, were all dumbfounded. What was going on? The shadow guards rushed forward and grabbed Lin Miao's arm. Seeing that she still wanted to resist, they slashed the back of her neck with a knife. Lin Miao lowered her head in pain and said angrily through gritted teeth, "Crown Princess, what are you trying to do?" The little crown princess looked like she couldn't be bothered to talk to an idiot. She waved her hand. "Take her away." Two shadow guards immediately grabbed Lin Miao, like they were grabbing a little chick, and carried her in the direction of the capital office. Guisin was dumbfounded. And Ai Hanji was also a little dumbfounded. She couldn't help but raise her voice and say angrily, "What do you mean by this? She just wants to compete with you in spiritual beasts. Why are you? Take her away too." The little crown princess raised her hand impatiently. Immediately, two more hidden guards rushed over and grabbed the cursing Ai Hanji without saying a word. They dragged her towards the capital office. "Let me go, you. Impudent. Impudent." And Ai Hanji was so angry that her heart ached. She had never been treated like this before. What kind of crown princess was this? She was simply a crazy person. Why did she send them to the capital office's prison without saying anything? If Empress Dowager Chun was here, she would definitely want to curse out loud. This little crown princess was indeed a piece of trash. She wanted to compete with you in spiritual beasts, but you used your power to suppress her. She wanted to play harem and mind games with you, but you didn't play by the rules at all and used your strength to suppress her. How could they continue to play with you? You didn't play harem games, you didn't play with strength in Jianghu. You were the opposite of everyone. Who could continue to play with you happily? Peft! And Wu Shuang almost burst out laughing. She opened her mouth and laughed out loud. But at this moment, Lin Miao's howl came from afar. In the blink of an eye, that huge black dog that was scratching its paws on the ground suddenly flared up all its fur and pounced at Xiao Mu with a whoosh. Roar! Woof woof! Woof! The three little white dogs' fur bristled as they leaped out. Whoosh! 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 They pounced on the large black dog like three bolts of lightning. One of them bit its back, the other its chest, and the last one pounced on its throat and bit it right in the face. After a few tearing sounds, the giant dog let out a miserable howl. 3 pieces of flesh were torn off by the cute little puppy, and blood immediately gushed out like a fountain. Woof! And Wu Shuang was completely stunned. She rubbed her eyes. The silent crowd suddenly burst into a burst of panicked screams. Wow! Everyone rolled and crawled as they fled in all directions in a sorry state. They were scared to the point their scalps went numb. What the fuck is going on? How could these 3 little puppies, which were only the size of a palm, bite such a huge dog to death in a pool of blood? Wasn't this a little too cruel? Guisin was the only one of the 3 girls who hadn't been taken away. At this moment, she was so scared that she sat down on the ground. Her legs were stained with dog blood. She was so scared that she kept retreating, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. This was too frightening, too frightening. The 3 adorable little puppies had actually been able to unleash such power all of a sudden. No one had expected this, and no one was mentally prepared. So they all went home with vomiting expressions and had nightmares. Chapter 4037. In the blue and white restaurant, the little crown princess was stroking the fur of the 3 puppies beside her. And Wu Shuang laughed with a wine glass in her hand. I think those onlookers won't be able to sleep tonight. It was too funny, thinking back to the confused, frightened, and defenseless expressions on everyone's faces. Ha 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 ha! Princess Wu Shuang burst into laughter. Emolien looked at the bright candle in disdain and took the dishes in front of her to arbor. Don't spray. Brother, you're not giving me any face at all. Princess Wu Shuang's face immediately turned bitter. Give you no face? I'll give you face when you get married obediently. Don't come looking for your sister-in-law for no reason and affect our married life. And Wu Shuang really wanted to smash the wine glass in her hand into his face. Arbor blinked and glanced at Emolien beside him, then looked up at Princess Wu Shuang. Wu Shuang, why are you here? And Wu Shuang immediately dragged the stool towards Arbor. I'm here to talk to my sister-in-law. Sister-in-law, I don't know if you've heard that the people from the Medicine King Island want to hold an elixir auction in Dragonflame City. Sister-in-law, are you free? Let's go and have fun together. Your sister-in-law is not free. Emolien rejected her without hesitation. Third Fu will be back in the capital tomorrow. He should be free these days. You can go and find him. And Wushuang's head drooped, and she lowered it. Arbor looked at Emolien in confusion. Emolien took his wife's hand and glared at Wushuang with a look of disappointment. She's just a papaya head. Jojo, help me persuade her when you're free. Brother, can we not talk about him? And Wushuang glared at him angrily. Arbor dragged the stool towards Wushuang and asked her, Lien said that you and third young Master Fu are in love with each other. Why do you have such an expression at the mention of him? The little fellow said to her with an experienced expression. You haven't seen someone you like for a long time. Don't you miss him? If Jojo's Ren leaves for a while, Jojo will miss her. Emolien. What should he do if he felt that his wife was hilarious? And Wushuang mumbled and said sourly, Don't listen to brother's nonsense. Third young Master Fu already has a fiancé. Why should I join in the fun? What? Jojo was unhappy when he heard this. I didn't expect Third Fu to be such a scumbag. He actually had a wife and still came to provoke you? Then just ignore him. Emolien did not know whether to laugh or cry. He quickly pulled his wife to his side and tried to prove his brother's innocence in a low voice. Third Fu doesn't have a wife. Don't listen to Wushuang's nonsense. Third Fu has done a meritorious deed by clearing out the zombies in Li City. Let's ask father to arrange a marriage for him. Why was there so much trouble? Wushuang was the only one who liked to let her imagination run wild. Brother. And Wushuang called out in dissatisfaction. All right. Emolien could not be bothered with her and waved his hand. You're so long-winded. A 19-year-old girl is even more naggy than a 90-year-old woman. And Wushuang! Exclamation point. Brother, what did I say? From the beginning to the end, you were the only one talking and acting on your own. Okay. It really made her speechless. Xiao Mu couldn't resist smiling as the corner of her mouth turned up. Chapter 4038. After a while, Arbor took out a silver needle and tested it on the three puppies. Then, she sighed and put down the needle. It's useless to take blood now. Why? And Wushuang asked curiously. I think these three puppies are extraordinarily brave. They're even braver than the tigers and wolves in my army. Wushuang built a tiger and wolf battalion. Emolien put the peeled shrimp on the small plate in front of Arbor and said with a smile, Jojo, is there any way to strengthen the bodies of tigers and wolves? Those should be low-level spiritual beasts. Arbor tilted her head. There is. She took out a few bottles of medicinal liquid from her inner world and put them in front of Wushuang. These were the medicinal liquid of the breakthrough pills that she had made. It should be effective for both human and beast bodies. She remembered that her master had left many advancement pills in the longevity hall. She guessed that these would be useful. She would send a few bottles to Princess Wushuang later. Dilute these medicinal liquid before giving it to them. Just add a little to their food every day. And Wushuang nodded and took the bottles happily. Sister-in-law, I've heard that your alchemy skills are superb. I didn't expect that you'd also have experience in improving beasts. The medicinal pills that ordinary alchemists made were naturally targeted at human cultivators. Arbor had so many beasts around her, so she was different. When she was free, she would think about how to make some pills to improve her beasts. After a long time, she naturally gained a lot of experience. Emolien poked a cute little puppy in the next episode and shook his head in exasperation. It seems that my previous conjecture wasn't wrong. After the Cerberus escaped from the Tower of Punishment, it asked for your protection. Emolien had a funny expression. Speaking of which, these three puppies had good taste. If they followed Jojo, even if the Heavenly Tao wanted to attack them, it would have to consider whether it could defeat Jojo first. Woof. One of the puppies flipped its body over and revealed a heroic expression. You can poke Master Silver. Ada is not afraid of pain. Arbor couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He rubbed its fur and shook his head. If you can't regain your status as a holy beast, it's useless even if you take the blood. The Cerberus should have been heavily injured by the heavenly Tao when it escaped from the Tower of Punishment. Emolien pondered for a moment before saying, Jojo, think about it. Before this, it had always wanted to eat the two-headed Jiao's sacred beast crystal core. Later on, it didn't even want to let go of the sacred beast lion's egg. Qiao Mu nodded. She also remembered how these three little fellows had disdainfully eaten the spirit beast raging flame hound's crystal core. Their reluctant attitude made it seem like the spirit beast crystal core was neglecting them. They were overjoyed when they saw the phoenix spring, and they even wanted to eat the poisonous flower king, a saint-ranked poisonous creature. Everything shows that they are trying their best to recover their strength. Emolien sighed softly. Poor Cerberus. It was a holy beast, but what kind of dog had it been beaten into by the heavenly Tao? Why couldn't it even speak human language? Lord Jojo rubbed the three puppies' heads sympathetically and said softly but firmly, Master Silver will refine restoration pills for you to help you recover your strength. Now they had to find a holy beast, kill it, and peel off its crystal core for them to consume. This was something that could only be chanced upon and not sought. As for pills, compared to Jojo, it was much simpler. Woof. Chapter 4039. The three puppies felt a sense of bliss that they had never felt before. Masta finally understood them completely. Masta, you're finally enlightened. It's not that we want to snatch delicious food. It's that we really want to recover our strength. We really want to give Masta a kiss. However, looking at the great crown prince, who was sitting on the side and glancing at them out of the corner of his eye from time to time, the three puppies very conscientiously didn't act rashly. Who the hell knew what would happen to them if they kissed Masta? Sir Jojo had a solemn and earnest expression as he patted the three puppies' heads. It's been hard on you. Don't worry, with me here you'll definitely recover as good as new. Moreover, heavenly law can forget about finding trouble with you in the future. Woof. Masta is mighty. Masta is mighty, and Wushuang. She suddenly felt that her sister-in-law was so awesome. How did heavenly law get involved? Downstairs, after the large dog's corpse was cleaned up by the city guards, the pedestrians on the streets gradually started to move more densely. After the trio finished eating, they left the room and walked downstairs. Arbor suddenly turned around and tugged at her husband's sleeve. She pointed at a stall opposite the door. Husband, there's someone selling white sugar cakes over there. I want to eat them. Emolien looked in the direction she pointed and nodded. Wait for me in the carriage first. I'll buy them and bring them over. Arbor nodded. Seeing that the white sugar cake stall was doing well, and that there were several people lining up in front of the stall, she thought that the taste should be pretty good, so she could buy a few more pieces and leave them for the snack vendor Lin. Emolien left with quick steps with a smile. When Arbor turned around, she saw Princess Wushuang clutching her chest with a pitiful expression that said, Why are you abusing dogs? The little stoic lifted her hand to rub Wushuang's head and said earnestly, Younger sister, after you get married in the future, you'll also be as good as us when you meet a considerate husband. And Wushuang's feet almost slipped, and her head almost hit the door frame. Damn, her sister-in-law was younger than her by 3 years. Looking at her senior-like expression, it really didn't match her stoic face. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. Princess Wushuang repeated it 3 times in her heart and adjusted her expression. The two of them chatted as they walked out. As soon as they reached the door, they came face to face with a woman who was surrounded by a myriad of stars. That young lady was protected by 3 maidservants. When she caught sight of Princess Wushuang and the little stoic, she was slightly taken aback. Then, she hurriedly curtsied and said, Princess Wushuang. That woman's gaze paused on Wushuang's face for several seconds before landing on the little stoic and giving her 2 probing glances. Arbor naturally didn't recognize the woman who was secretly sizing him up. After all, ever since she came to the Divine Prefecture, she had been quite busy. She had been running between the academy and the capital, and sometimes she would go out to train for long periods of time. She was not in the capital. Other than occasionally attending palace banquets and meeting the madams of the families of third-rank high officials and above, as well as the womenfolk of some extremely famous patrician families in the imperial capital, she wasn't familiar with the rest. When En Wuxiang saw that young lady, her expression didn't have much of a reaction. She merely swept her calm gaze over her and nodded at her. Miss Bao doesn't need to be so courteous. After saying this, she took the little crown princess' hand and brushed past that young lady, looking like she didn't want to say anything more. Princess, please wait. Chapter 40. However, Miss Bao suddenly called out to En Wuxiang when they brushed past each other. Arbor and Wuxiang turned to look at her at the same time. Princess Wuxiang said indifferently, "Is there anything else, Miss Bao?" Miss Bao was about 18 or 19 years old. She looked very sweet and pleasant, and her smile was graceful and delicate. She looked very gentle and demure. Miss Bao was also dressed in red, but her style was different from Princess Wuxiang's. Wuxiang's gaze was more resolute than that of ordinary girls. She looked valiant, and with her fiery red makeup, one could tell that she had the demeanor of a general. However, Miss Bao's red dress made her look graceful and alluring. The red dress made her soft and beautiful face look even more radiant and enchanting. Qiao Mu creased her brows. She didn't notice it earlier, but after taking a closer look, she couldn't help but feel baffled. This Miss Bao in front of her actually wore the same outfit as Commandery Princess Wuxiang. This really was awkward. "Do you have time, Princess? Can we have a chat in the wing room?" Princess Wuxiang rejected her without hesitation. "I don't have time." Miss Bao's expression froze, but she seemed to be used to Princess Wuxiang's tone. She smiled sweetly and said, "I won't take up too much of your time. I just want to say a few words." Princess Wuxiang's face was full of impatience. Miss Bao hurriedly added, "Yes, it's about my husband." Princess Wuxiang's expression changed slightly. Arbor, who was standing at the side, sized Miss Bao up in confusion. "I see that you are dressed as an unmarried girl. How can you have a husband?" Miss Bao's face flushed slightly. She rubbed the handkerchief in her hand and said in a low voice, "I've embarrassed myself in front of this young madam." Princess Wuxiang frowned as if she could not bear to hear Miss Bao's nonsensical address. She said lightly, "This is the crown princess. Why aren't you coming forward to greet her?" Miss Bao was shocked, but she did not show it on her face. She hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. "I am Bao Cuiping. Greetings to the crown princess." The little crown princess was getting impatient. "Get up. Don't block the way." Bao Cuiping's face stiffened. She was standing at the entrance of the restaurant. With 3 maidservants, she blocked the entrance and exit of the restaurant. Arbor and the others couldn't get out. There were also 2 or 3 madams and young misses who were watching the fun outside, but they couldn't get in either. The 3 maidservants behind Bao Cuiping hurriedly took 2 steps back. Bao Cuiping's expression was rather awkward as she dodged to the side and said softly, "Your Highness, Cuiping only wants to say a few words about my husband. Actually, it won't take up too much of your time." "I know what you want to say." And Wuxiang waved her hand impatiently and interrupted her. "Don't worry. I and Wuxiang have my own pride." "Humph. Cuiping didn't mean it that way. Please don't be angry, Your Highness." Bao Cuiping quickly lowered her head with tears in her eyes. Her pitiful appearance, as if she was being bullied, instantly attracted the attention of many people in the hall. And Wuxiang was infuriated. This Miss Bao was most likely crazy. She had the nerve to stand here and let everyone in the hall gossip about her. And Wuxiang even felt embarrassed for her. The little crown princess looked speechlessly at that girl. She shook her head and sighed. "Stop pretending. I'm about to throw up the food I just ate." Chapter 40-41. And Wuxiang was taken aback, and she turned to look at her sister-in-law. The little stoic was expressionless, but the words that came out of her mouth were venomous to the extreme. "Wuxiang only told you to move aside and not block the way, but you look like someone beat you up. What's going on? If other people don't want to talk to me, I definitely won't pester them. But you? Why do you keep blocking us? It's not like that. Bao Tsuaping looked pitiful and on the verge of collapse. She knitted her willowy brows and said with tears in her eyes, Crown Princess, please forgive me. This humble girl didn't mean to block. The little Crown Princess raised her hand and stopped her from continuing. If you don't mean to, then move aside. She was so long-winded that she couldn't even eat in peace. Miss Bao's body suddenly tilted, as if she had fainted from anger, and she abruptly slumped onto her maidservant. Those 3 maidservants immediately shrieked anxiously, Miss! Arbor wordlessly turned his head back and met the similarly speechless Princess Wushuang's eyes. Was she sick? The little Crown Princess looked at Princess Wushuang oddly. Princess Wushuang nodded in full agreement. Wasn't she sick? At this time, her illness of fainting from time to time was truly becoming more frequent. Princess, a maidservant hurriedly said, Our miss only wanted to say a few words to you, Princess. Do you need to anger her to the point of fainting? Tsuaping. A man's shout came from outside. A young man in luxurious brocade clothes quickly squeezed in from the entrance and supported the unconscious Bao Tsuaping. What's going on? Tsuaping? What are you all still standing there for? Hurry and call for a physician. That man supported Bao Tsuaping, and his sharp eyes glared at the little Crown Princess and Princess Wushuang. He didn't recognize the little Crown Princess, but he evidently recognized Wushuang. Thus, his gaze ultimately landed on Wushuang, and he shouted harshly, Princess Wushuang, why is it you again? Do you think our Marquis Ning estate is easy to bully? Tsuaping fainted from anger every time. Princess Wushuang really wanted to tell him, Young man, don't you think that it's not normal for your cousin to faint from anger every time? The little Crown Princess shook her head and looked sympathetically at Bao Tsuaping, who was in the man's arms. She said indifferently, Her body is completely useless. Why is it that you fainted for no reason when you were talking properly? I looked at her face and saw that it was slightly pale. It seemed that her liver, kidney, lungs, and meridians were blocked. You will be frightened and restless when you sleep. You will suffer from insomnia and many dreams. If it's more serious, it will cause the body to lose balance, faint at any time, and even walk unsteadily. The heart meridians are full and large, which means that the body is very hot, and the meridians are not very harmonious. If this were allowed to continue, he would develop epilepsy symptoms in the future. Spasms in the limbs, spasms in the veins, and in more serious cases, infertility for life. Everyone was speechless. At the side, Princess Wushuang's mouth was slightly agape, and she looked as if she had seen a god. She stared blankly at her sister-in-law. My God, the little Crown Princess was really vicious. She said that fainting was a big problem and that there would be more serious problems in the future. Everyone looked again at Bao Tsuaping, who was lying in the man's arms. At this moment, her limbs were indeed spasming. They instantly looked at the little Crown Princess as if they were looking at a peerless doctor. The rumors were indeed true. Chapter 40-42. The Crown Princess's medical skills were superb. She had single-handedly pulled the dying empress back from the gates of hell. No wonder she could tell at a glance that this girl's body was not well. If it got worse, she would develop epilepsy. Look, weren't her limbs already twitching uncontrollably? No one knew that Bao Tsuaping was twitching in anger at the Crown Princess's poisonous tongue. Miss Mississippi. The 3 servant girls were terrified. They knelt by their miss's side and called her name repeatedly. Bao Tsuaping could only pretend that she was slowly waking up. She groaned and slowly opened her eyes. At this time, the young Crown Princess and Princess Wushuang had already walked out hand in hand. Seeing this, the young master of the Chong Ningho estate immediately shouted angrily, Stop, Princess Wushuang! Shouldn't you give an explanation for bullying a girl of my Chong Ningho estate? Princess Wushuang looked coldly at the young master and said coolly, Fourth young Master Fu, what explanation do you want? As she spoke, she unhurriedly untied the red soft whip from her waist. Without any explanation, she swung it in his direction. Startled, Fourth young Master Fu hurriedly raised his arm to block. Unexpectedly, he was hit squarely by the red whip. Are you satisfied with this explanation? And Wu Shuang looked at her coldly. Her tone suddenly became stern. If you are not satisfied, you can come with me to His Majesty to judge. I and Wu Shuang can even go to war. Why would I be afraid of a little Chong Ningho playboy? I and Wu Shuang went to war when I was 13. I have guarded the borders for more than 6 years. I have participated in 103 wars, big and small. What explanation do I need to give you? What explanation do you want me to give you? Her eyes were full of disdain and disdain. Once her aura rose, no one in the hall dared to speak. Not to mention a little playboy of the Chong Ningho estate. Even if there were court officials in front of her, they would have to bow their heads and respectfully call her Princess Wu Shuang. Hatred flashed through Bao Cuiping's eyes. She wiped her tears and sobbed quietly. Princess, why did you have to be so harsh on cousin? Cousin didn't do anything to you, and Wu Shuang looked over coldly. There was a hint of a smile on her face, and a cold and sharp aura was emitted from her. Bao Cuiping hurriedly lowered her eyes, hiding the faint haze in her eyes, and Wu Shuang didn't say anything else. She held Arbor's hand and walked out of the Azure Flower restaurant together. Sister-in-law, you can continue shopping with my brother. I'll go back first, Princess Wu Shuang said with a smile. Arbor knew that she must be in a bad mood after what happened just now. He nodded and said, okay, and Wu Shuang bid farewell and left. Not long after, Prince Mo returned with 2 bags of white sugar cakes. Not bad, not bad. Wu Shuang was quite sensible. She knew that she could not continue to stay here and disturb the young couple. She should have left tactfully. Arbor glanced at him and pulled him into the carriage. He couldn't help but ask curiously, that cousin of the Chong Ningho estate, Miss Bao, is Third Fu's fiancé? What fiancé? The crown prince curled his lip in disdain. Third Fu's stepmother can't decide his marriage. Every family has its own difficulties. The crown prince held his wife's small hand and said in a low voice, his stepmother doesn't have good intentions. She always wants to push her niece to Third Fu. Chapter 40-43. That Miss Bao is Third Fu's stepmother's niece? The little crown princess looked curious and gossipy. The crown prince nodded disdainfully. Madame Ne Bao harbors evil intentions and thinks she can do whatever she wants in the Marquis Ning estate. What a joke. Then what's up with the engagement? The little crown princess asked curiously. I saw that Wu Shuang's attitude towards the people of the Marquis Ning estate is very cold. She probably also resents Third Fu. The engagement was arranged by Madame Ne Bao's wishful thinking, but she didn't go through any formalities. This matter has spread like wildfire in the capital. You mean that the stepmadam is scheming against Third Fu? The crown prince nodded and pinched the little crown princess's cheek with a smile. Third Fu can handle it himself, so we don't need to worry too much about him. Third Fu has contributed greatly in suppressing the zombies in Li City this time. Royal Father will definitely reward him when the time comes. Speaking of which, the 3 provinces haven't been too peaceful recently. The little crown princess lifted her head and opened the bag to take out a small piece of white sugar cake. She put it in her mouth and took a bite. Say, should we go destroy their nests? Prince Mo couldn't help but want to laugh. He pulled his wifey's hand and said, Jojo, do you feel a bit idle? Don't tell me you forgot that the finals of the Heaven Primordial Roll will be held in 10 days. We'll have something to do then. The little crown princess nodded reluctantly and couldn't resist muttering to herself, I wonder if Duanyu, that guy, will come at that time. Since he promised that he would appear, then he will definitely come. The next day, Third Young Master Fu led a group of generals into the capital and reported the situation of suppressing the zombies in Li City. The emperor was overjoyed and conferred upon him the title of third-rank General Wooding and bestowed upon him a residence in the general's estate on Changle South Street. That afternoon, General Wooding's estate was blessed with 2 joyous events. His Majesty selected a matchmaker and bestowed a marriage between General Wooding and Princess Wu Shuang. The Crown Prince and the little Crown Princess were sitting in the Eastern Palace, eating snacks and gossiping. When the topic of the marriage came up, the two of them were enjoying it. Just wait and see. This matter is not over yet, the crown prince said with certainty. It would be strange if the Fu family could stop. This is a marriage arranged by His Majesty. Can the second lady of the Marquis Ning Manor make a fuss and defy the decree? Heh! Emolien pinched his wife's small, round chin. There really are a lot of people with holes in their brains in this world. Xiao Yi suddenly jumped in and cupped his hands at the two of them. Your Highness, Crown Princess. The Fu family is really causing trouble at Third Young Master Fu's residence. When Prince Mo heard this, he immediately pulled his wife to her feet. Let's go, Jojo. I'll take you to watch the show. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. Am I such a person who likes to watch the show? No. The Crown Prince immediately shook his head and said with a grin, It's your husband who likes to watch. Xiao Yi stood behind the two of them and rolled his eyes helplessly. His Highness the Crown Prince was usually a dignified and calm person, but in front of the Crown Princess, he didn't seem like a normal person. If His Highness had a tail behind him, it would definitely be wagging happily. Xiao Yi looked at the two of them with a strange expression. For some reason, he inexplicably associated his master with a cute pet. Emolien seemed to sense something and suddenly glanced at Xiao Yi. Chapter 40-44. The latter hurriedly adjusted his expression and bowed to his master with an incomparably sincere face. Master, this way please. No one knew what he was thinking in his heart. Emolien glanced at Xiao Yi and pulled his wife's small hand. The two of them quickly walked out. Wait! Arbor took out a transportation talisman array and waved it at his fingertips. Use this. Xiao Ye's eyes brightened. The great crown princess was indeed wise. Since they were going to watch the show, of course, the faster the better. It would save them the trouble and they could watch the entire show. Emolien inwardly pursed her lips in amusement. Who was the one who said that he wasn't interested in watching the show? The three of them instantly disappeared from the transportation talisman array. When they reappeared, they were already standing in an alley on Changle Street. They were about a few minutes away from the newly bestowed General Wooding's residence by the Emperor. Should we use an invisibility talisman? The little crown princess asked with a curious expression. Xiao Ye's mouth twitched. Where can't our crown prince go? Why use an invisibility talisman? It's not like we're going to sneak around. His Highness the Crown Prince immediately nodded. We're going to watch the show openly. Who can chase us out? The little Crown Princess silently put away her talisman and nodded. All right then, lead the way. Xiao Ye's mouth twitched. For some reason, he felt that the Crown Princess was actually very keen on watching the show. Don't be fooled by her expressionless face. Heh heh. There was already a trace of excitement in her tone. The three of them quickly ran to the entrance of General Wooding's residence. Coincidentally, they saw a carriage speeding to the entrance of the general's residence. Before the carriage came to a stop, they saw a figure dressed in red with a swoosh darting out of the carriage. There was a scarlet whip in his hand and he looked like he was about to pick a fight. The little crown princess hurriedly pulled His Highness the Crown Prince to hide under the eaves at the side. She poked her head out to look with a gloating expression. Third Fu acted first and reported later. He asked Imperial Father to approve the marriage. Wu Shuang came to the door with a whip. Wu Shuang, this lass is merely a paper tiger. Don't be fooled by how she's all bark and no bite. She'll definitely wilt after being coaxed with a few words. Crown Prince Mo whispered into his daughter-in-law's ear. While they were talking, they saw a white figure stumbling out of the alley. With a sharp cry, she threw herself in front of Princess Wu Shuang. Princess, I beg you to show mercy. And Wu Shuang took a closer look and couldn't help but roll her eyes. Wasn't it Bao Cuiping, Bao Wu Shuang's daughter, who she had seen at the restaurant yesterday? Bao Cuiping was crying so hard that she looked like she was about to stop breathing. She sobbed and said, Your Highness, please be magnanimous and let Cuiping go. Please don't steal my husband from me. Okay? You are noble, dignified, and beautiful. Why do you have to steal someone else's husband? I already have an engagement with my husband. Princess Wushuang was so angry that her face turned pale. She suddenly flung Bao Cuiping's hand away and said harshly, "What nonsense are you talking about? Do you believe that I will whip your stinky mouth to death?" The princess was so anxious that she burst out with vulgarities. Her eyes widened in anger and Bao Cuiping shrank back in fear. "I want to steal your man?" Princess Wushuang said angrily. "What are you thinking? Can't you see that I am also here to ask about the situation? Get out of here immediately." Chapter 40-45. With a creaking sound, the door of General Wooding's residence suddenly opened to both sides. Third young Master Fu appeared in front of An Wushuang in a flash. When An Wushuang saw this guy, she was instantly enraged. She raised her whip and lashed it at his handsome face that didn't stop. "I'll whip you to death, you little bastard. How dare you scheme against me? Tell me, did you say something in front of His Majesty?" This imperial edict came as fast as lightning. She was just sitting at home, and disaster came from the heavens. The imperial edict hit her on the spot, and she was stunned on the spot. The most infuriating thing was that when she sent a message to her father happily replied with 2 lines of words. "Congratulations, my daughter. His Majesty has finally done something serious and settled my daughter's marriage. I can also continue to guard the border with peace of mind." Third young Master Fu blinked and reached out to grab the tail of her whip. The fiery red whip immediately straightened. "What are you doing? It's only been an hour and you want to kill your husband?" Who is my husband?" An Wushuang stuttered, her face red with anger. You, shameless. What's there to be shameless about?" Third young Master Fu pulled the whip and instantly pulled his wife from one end to the other. He reached out to hug her skillfully, and Wushuang kicked him in anger. "Let go." "Ha! I'll let go if you win. Shameless. Who's the shameless one? Could it be that you've forgotten that when we first met, the moment you jumped into my carriage, you stretched out your hand to tease me? You." Princess Wushuang was so angry that she was speechless. She glanced and saw several men and women with ugly expressions walking out of General Wooding's residence. The Marquis of Marquis Ning's residence and the second Madame Bao, were all present. Their expressions were ugly. Luckily, General Wooding's residence occupied a large area. The entrance was an empty piece of land. Other than the general's residence, there were no other residences nearby. Thus, the group of people made a ruckus at the entrance and did not attract much attention from outside the alley. "Cousin." When Miss Bao saw third young Master Fu, she did not dare to call him husband so shamelessly in front of him. She looked at him plaintively, but he didn't even look at her. He only took the whip from his wife and rolled it up before throwing it into his inner world. Princess Wushuang was so angry that she struggled in his arms for a while, but she couldn't get out. She wanted to bite him to death. "What are you trying to do? I haven't seen my wife for a long time. I want to give her a hug to relieve my longing." Third young Master Fu blinked and looked at her with an aggrieved expression. He mumbled, Shuang, I am injured." And Wushuang was slightly shocked. She quickly looked at him and asked subconsciously, "Where are you hurt?" With this fellow's cultivation, he shouldn't have been captured by a few corpse puppets, right? "Here." Third young Master Fu teased his wife as if no one else was around. He reached out, grabbed her small hand and pressed it against his heart. And Wushuang's pretty face flushed red. She felt that the heart of the person under her was boiling like a fire. She immediately spat at him and said angrily, "Let go of me." Miss Bao fainted immediately. The maidservant beside her quickly reached out to catch her body and screamed, "Third young master, Miss Bao fainted. Which day doesn't she faint?" Third young Master Fu sneered. Chapter 40-46. "I'm not a doctor. You can't possibly give her a diagnosis, right?" His tone was cold and indifferent as he said, "Why aren't you taking her to the medical hall to find a doctor? She probably has some hidden illness that makes her faint so easily." And Wushuang looked speechlessly at this sharp-tongued fellow. She struggled slightly but was unable to break free. Instead, she allowed him to hug her even tighter. You let go. Even Princess Wushuang, a female general who had been in the army for many years, couldn't help but blush. Third Fu's family was standing at the side watching. What was this? Third young Master Fu looked at her with a faint smile. I can let go, but you can't run away again. When did I run away? Ha ha. Third Fu loosened his embrace and grabbed in Wushuang's small hand. He pulled her into the mansion as if no one else was around. Stop right there. Madame Bao stomped her feet in anger and couldn't help but scream. You're really all grown up now. You don't even need to listen to your parents anymore. Do you? Father, women don't understand, but you don't understand either? Third Fu looked at the ashen-faced Marquis Fu in amusement. When we were inside just now, didn't I make myself clear enough? Madame Bao wants to control your son's marriage? She's not qualified. Marquis Fu's face was sullen. Senor, you're a man. You know that if a girl's reputation is ruined, it'll be hard for her to marry into a good family. The matter between you and Sueping, she can only blame herself. Third Fu sneered and said with a cold expression. Or she can blame her own aunt. Nothing has happened yet, but she's already spreading rumors outside and causing a storm in the capital. It's as if I, Third Fu, have already married her. Where did she get the guts to do this? Doesn't she think she's funny? Madame Bao was so angry that her entire body trembled. She was like her niece, her body swaying and almost falling. Madam, don't tell me you want to faint too? Third Fu laughed at the two of them. Unfilial son. Marquis Fu's old face flushed red. Anyway, even if you can't disobey His Majesty's edict and insist on marrying Princess Wushuang, you can't let down your cousin's deep feelings. You must marry your cousin. At the very least, she must be a concubine. Concubine? Wouldn't that be too unfair to my cousin? Third young Master Fu said with a smile. It's good that you know. Madame Bao was furious. She curled her lips and shouted, If you really know your mistake, it's not impossible to make your cousin a co-wife after 3 months of marriage. Ha 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 ha. Third young Master Fu hugged Princess Wushuang's slender waist and laughed wildly. What are you laughing at? Madame Bao flew into a rage out of embarrassment. Madam, don't worry. Your Bao family status is noble. How can you let Miss Bao be a concubine? Third young Master Fu gave a strange smile. Before I left the palace, I went to the Empress to ask for a decree. I will bestow a marriage between fourth brother and cousin. The two of them will love each other dearly and will be together forever. Oh, counting the time, the Empress's decree should be reaching Marquis Ning's estate soon. Why aren't the two of you going back to receive the decree? It's not good to keep the eunuch delivering the decree waiting for a long time. You. Madame Bao turned pale with fright. She pointed at third young Master Fu and screamed in a trembling voice. You! She immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the spot. Arbor looked speechlessly at Emolien. Brothers are indeed the same kind of people. What a scam. See you tomorrow. Chapter 40-47. Apparently, this Madame Bao vomited blood again after returning home. Her entire body was slanted on the bed and she couldn't get up at all. During dinner, Saichi vividly recounted the information she heard. Mother really issued a decree for their family? Saichi nodded. It's true. She betrothed fourth young master and Miss Cousin to Marquis Ning Estate's fourth young master. That fourth young master is Madame Bao's biological son. These past 2 years, Madame Bao has been picking all over the place, wanting to find a rich young miss from a wealthy family to match her son. Unexpectedly, Saichi couldn't resist covering her mouth in amusement. Xiaomu blinked before setting down the ladle and commenting with a nod. That's not bad either. That day at Blue and White Flower Restaurant, fourth young Master Fu and this cousin of his seemed to be in love with each other. But Madame Bao definitely won't be satisfied. Saichi pursed her lips and said with a smile, Madame Bao wholeheartedly wants her son to climb up the social ladder. How could she possibly hope for her son to marry her niece? The Bao family simply doesn't rank high in the imperial capital. In the end, it's just a small family. Who told her to want to trick others? Arbor humphed. In the end, she tricked herself. Since Mother Queen had decreed the marriage, Madame Bao could only swallow her broken teeth and blood. No matter how much she looked down on her niece, she could only let her own son marry someone else. Those who harmed others would end up harming themselves. She completely brought this upon herself. Arbor's hand paused, and she looked up at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal who had suddenly appeared beside her. The latter smiled at her the moment he came out and tossed a palm-sized stone in his hand. "Jojo, look, we found a sacred meridian on Peak Planet." Arbor's eyes lit up, and she reached out to take the stone from his hand. "Chirp, chirp," the little girl called out. The little white squirrel immediately flashed out and reached out 2 small paws to hold the stone. It peeled off the outer layer of the stone like peeling a banana, revealing a fist-sized pure gold sacred stone inside. A powerful energy wave rapidly circulated within this tiny sacred stone. The little fellow held it in her hand and stared at it without blinking. Looking up at the grinning venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, the little stoic blinked and asked, "It's useful." Of course. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal raised his hand and took the holy stone from her. "This small piece of holy stone is enough for me to absorb for about an hour. Then let's mine it." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal nodded with a smile. When Dao Wuji and the rest saw this holy stone, their eyes lit up. Needless to say, they were naturally willing to do the hard work. Arbor nodded in response. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal said, That guy isn't back yet." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard Emolien's voice from outside the door. "What do you want?" The little stoic ran to the door. When she looked up, she saw Emolien striding through the door and reaching out to pull her over. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes. "Since you're back, let's go." "Where are we going?" Emolien and Arbor asked in unison. In a flash, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal appeared in front of Arbor. "Jojo, have you forgotten? The people from the Pure Heaven sect that we met in the Phoenix Forest. Their stronghold in the Divine Province is located on the outskirts of Dragon Flame City." Realization dawned on Arbor and he nodded his small head. Recently, he had been running between the academy and the capital, wholeheartedly searching for Cerberus blood for Murong Soon, so he had forgotten about this important matter. This was indeed an important matter. Chapter 40-48. When he met Emolien's slightly puzzled phoenix eyes, Arbor pulled her aside and whispered something to her. He recounted to Emolien how he encountered the Clear Sky Sect's disciples with the knife-scarred man and his group in Phoenix Woods. When he mentioned how those people besieged her and were ultimately killed by them, Emolien's eyes also darkened. The Clear Sky Sect's people haven't died out yet? The faction behind the Clear Sky Sect resembles Tianyun but also doesn't. Their Clear Sky Sect's several operations don't seem to have much connection with Tianyun. This Clear Sky Sect's favorite thing to do seemed to be besieging and killing the little stoic. She was well aware that the person behind this sect was definitely that old rival who had been plotting against her from the lower star domain to the upper 3 provinces and from her previous life to this life. Say, do you think they've all moved away from their base in the capital suburbs because the assassination mission in Phoenix Woods failed? The little stoic asked gravely. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal shook his head and said sarcastically, "I think they'll beat you at your own game and trick you again." The little fellow was smart and understood almost immediately. His eyes narrowed like cold lightning, and his voice was frosty. "Will that be the case?" Emolien also nodded slightly. "It should be." The 3 of them looked at each other with tacit understanding and then nodded, preparing to set out for the capital's suburbs under the cover of the night. The little stoic glanced at the Crown Prince. "Did Royal Father call you to the study because of Third Fu's incident today?" Prince Mo shook his head. "No, something happened with the State Preceptor." The little stoic involuntarily pursed her lips. She never had a good impression of this Sir State Preceptor. In reality, although this Sir State Preceptor didn't do anything on the surface, he gave off a strange feeling. He seemed like a friend yet also an enemy, and he was very reserved. The stoic boasted that she was quite intelligent, but she had never understood this person from beginning to end. Emolien followed her outside and said helplessly, "This matter is related to you." Arbor raised his eyebrows. "The Imperial Advisor has been detained by the Sea of Forgetfulness's Long family," Emolien said helplessly. "He sent a message to Imperial Father. The Sea of Forgetfulness's Long family wants to see you." Arbor was silent for a while. "We'll see." Emolien and the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at each other. At the same time, they saw a trace of icy coldness in the little fellow's eyes. Yes, it was indifference. When the Sea of Forgetfulness's Long family was mentioned, the little fellow's heart didn't stir too much. His expression was so indifferent that it made one feel a bit of heartache. "Jojo," Arbor said coldly, "my mother is no longer here. That foolish woman who was willing to sacrifice her happiness for the family is already dead. I'm not her." Her voice was cold and indifferent. At least for now, she wasn't mentally prepared to meet the Long family. What's more, what does the Long family detain the state preceptor have to do with her? Was she in Arbor the kind of girl who would come and go as she pleased? Detain the state preceptor and have her rush over? She would rush over? What a joke! Who was the state preceptor to her? She wasn't the kind of kind-hearted Virgin Mary who would immediately feel compassion for any cat or dog that was in danger. She silently turned around and walked outside. Emolien and the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal didn't say anything else and followed her outside. Halfway there, the two of them looked at each other again. Chapter 40-49. It seemed that Jojo harbored some resentment toward the Long family. But it made sense. That family in the Sea of Forgetfulness, for the sake of this illusory promise of 300 years of marriage, they had really ruined their daughter's lifetime happiness. According to Jojo's protective nature, she would definitely not like the Long family too much. Frankly speaking, the reason why he had repeatedly saved those merpeople was because he had promised Senior Schwanji that he would take care of those weak merpeople. Apart from that, Jojo and the Long family really did not have much of a relationship. The three of them left the Eastern Palace under the cover of night and headed toward the outskirts of the capital. Because they could not confirm the exact location for the time being, they did not use transportation talismans to teleport over. When they arrived near the outskirts of the capital, the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal pondered for a moment before leading them southwest. It was already late at night. On a small hill in the outskirts of the capital, summer cicadas chirped one after another. Xiao Mu, Emolien, and Ji-chan stopped at the entrance to an inconspicuous farmhouse's small courtyard at breakneck speed. "Here?" Arbor looked at He Shurchin meaningfully. The latter nodded slightly at her. According to the results of the soul-searching last time, the Clear Sky Sect's stronghold near the outskirts of the capital is here. An ordinary, inconspicuous farmhouse hidden among the large farmhouses in the outskirts of the capital was indeed well hidden. Arbor's fingers moved slightly. She casually sucked a piece of gravel from the ground into her palm and shot it out with a flick of her finger. Buzz! An inverted bowl-shaped defensive barrier appeared above the farmhouse that had been ambushed by an external force. In the sky above the originally quiet farmyard, a few dark figures also appeared. A hint of a smile appeared in He Shurchin's eyes. "You've come quickly. Who are you?" The other party shouted sternly. "Why bother with the pretense?" Arbor said indifferently. "You've been setting up defenses here for more than a day or two. You've been waiting for us for a long time, haven't you?" These people probably did not expect that it would take her so long to find their stronghold after returning to the capital. Ever since she left the Phoenix Forest, she had to run back and forth to the royal school, which took her more than half a month. Such a strange thing shouldn't be within the other party's control. They had probably been waiting for so long that they were getting impatient. The man in black was obviously stunned by Arbor's attitude. It was clear that Arbor and the other two knew that this was a trap, but they still came. "How bold!" Ren. Arbor turned to look at him. Emolien nodded. At the same time, she leaped into the air with Ichen. Together, they set up an even sturdier square-shaped defensive barrier around the farmhouse's courtyard. Arbor's lips curled into a sneer. He casually took out 2 divine power beads from his inner world and threw them over without saying a word. Boom! 2 loud sounds rang out. All sound was naturally blocked by the defensive wall. It was still a warm and beautiful night. The nearby farms and cottages did not know that a large-scale battle was taking place here. The men in black who were suddenly attacked by the divine power beads hurriedly scattered in all directions in shock. But it was too late. The divine power beads tore a huge hole in the defensive barrier they had set up. The huge impact seeped in through the hole and sent a few people flying several feet away. Pooh! Pew! The men in black were injured and vomited blood at the same time. Chapter 40-50. The look in his eyes changed abruptly, and then he turned around and ran toward the inner yard. Naturally, such a small manor wouldn't be too big. Xiao Mu waved her hand, and countless sand scorpions blotted out the sky as they swarmed toward this small manor to outflank it. Their movement speed was very fast, so fast that one could only see them clearly. They were black balls. It was as if a black wave had rushed into the courtyard and submerged the backyard in an instant. Ah! 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 From time to time, there were screams of horror coming from the yard. The hundreds of men in black in the inner yard were now surrounded by a large group of black scorpions like caged birds. The archers who were hiding on the rooftops were also in a state of confusion. They had been waiting here for a long time and did not expect to see a large group of black scorpions. Bang! The giant sand scorpion king appeared in the group of scorpions. The archers were refreshed. They could not deal with the sea of black scorpions below, but at least the giant sand scorpion king could be everyone's target. Didn't they say that to catch bandits, first catch the king? Maybe after they finished off the sand scorpion king, they could make the group of scorpions retreat. Thinking of this, the archers shot arrows at the sand scorpion king below. The arrows were all knocked down by the sand scorpion king's 2 huge iron pincers. The archers were secretly shocked. At this moment, one of them suddenly let out a miserable scream. The leader, who was about to scold the man to shut up, looked back and was almost scared out of his wits. A ball of flame suddenly burst out of the man's chest and enveloped his entire body in an instant. The man screamed in pain, and the flame on his body seemed to spread. Someone was so anxious that without thinking, he was kicked off the roof and fell into the sea of scorpions. In minutes, he was gnawed until not even a bone was left. Everyone was scared out of their wits, and their faces suddenly changed unpredictably. At the same time, strange flames kept coming out of people's bodies, and they were also kicked off the roof and fed to the scorpions. It's mosquitoes! Mosquitoes! One of the men finally noticed the anomaly and screamed out. Under the night sky, mosquitoes that were smaller than fingernails naturally wouldn't catch anyone's attention at first. But when they saw the real strength of the fiery evil mosquitoes, no one dared to underestimate them. This was a group of things that could kill without spilling blood. Watch out for these strange mosquitoes. Just as an archer let out a cry, he saw a ball of fire burrowing out of his chest. Everyone looked at him in horror. Even the vice-captain was affected. How strange these mosquitoes were. The archers on the roof were too busy to shoot arrows at the sand scorpion king. There was a large group of sand scorpions below, so they were invincible as they surged towards the black-clothed man like a tide. Anyone who was dragged into the group of sand scorpions, no matter who they were, could not escape the fate of being gnawed into dregs. Xiao Mu's eyes were frosty as she stared at the utterly defeated men in black who were doing their best to slaughter the sand scorpions, and a cold sneer flitted across her eyes. Trap? Did they want to trap her? Ha! In the face of absolute strength, any trap was useless. It would only accelerate their exposure and send them to hell. Arbor's eyes were cold and indifferent. He raised a luminous pearl. Chapter 40-51. The luminous pearl's gentle and warm light instantly illuminated the pitch-black sea of sand scorpions below. It also made the black-clothed men who were struggling against the sand scorpions in a flurry of motion to look over with slightly distorted hands. They saw the little girl hovering in the air above this small farmhouse's courtyard. Her expression was apathetic and aloof as usual, and her pair of bright almond-shaped eyes appeared especially sharp and bright in the night. One of them couldn't resist bellowing at Arbor. "You knew long ago that there was a trap here. You did it on purpose." A vine whip slid in front of that black-clothed man and slapped his face. That person steadied himself with great difficulty and hacked at several sand scorpions around him before attempting to leap into the air again. Damn it! It was this feeling of being controlled again. His entire body felt heavy, as if he was being controlled by someone endlessly, and he couldn't float at all. He wanted to float as he pleased inside the defensive barrier set up by Emolien and Ma Shurchen. He was truly incomparably naive. After failing to float, that person panted loudly and sternly said to his black-clothed subordinates, "Don't panic, gather, gather." When he turned his head to look halfway through, his face instantly contorted fiercely. There wasn't a single person around, other than the black scorpions that blotted out the sky and covered the earth beneath his feet. There wasn't even half a ghost. His subordinates had all died in the swarm of black scorpions. Looking at the spreading scorpions beneath his feet, that person closed his eyes and instantly felt that the situation was hopeless. His long saber fell into the swarm of black scorpions with a bang. His entire body expanded in a split second, and he swiftly charged in Arbor's direction at a terrifying speed. Even if he died, he had to drag someone down with him. Arbor's bone-chilling gaze stared at the person in front of him, and a faint sneer appeared on his lips. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. How dare you compete with the sun and moon for glory? The little stoic coldly said this and abruptly drew the thunderclap sword from her conscience. The sword streaked across the sky and slashed horizontally in that person's direction at lightning speed. It was as if a hole had been torn open in the void, and the air in this area twisted slightly. The sky was shattered and the night was silent. The man who was being oppressed by the second move of the Nine Heavens Thunder Sword Art, Thousand Lightning Phantoms, looked at the dark clouds in the sky in horror. He could only watch as the thousands of lightning bolts transformed into sword shadows, carrying traces of the power of thunder and lightning as they swooped down from the sky. Boom! 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 She poured all her emotions into this unlucky guy. Before he could successfully self-destruct, his entire body was crushed to pieces by the Thousand Lightning Phantasm. His entire body dissipated between heaven and earth. Arbor looked coldly at the scene in front of him. He lowered his head to look at the long sword in his hand that was surrounded by lightning. He slowly turned around and looked at the remaining 3 archers on the roof. The latter had long been scared out of his wits. After a few clanking sounds, the 3 of them threw down their weapons and surrendered with pale faces. At the same time, countless rupturing birds flew in front of them and surrounded them. The 3 archers looked at Arbor in horror as if they were looking at the messengers from hell. In a quarter of an hour, only the 3 of them remained out of more than 500 elite disciples of the Clear Sky sect. What kind of terrifying battle prowess was this? Master completely underestimated this little girl in front of them. She actually tamed so many poisonous insects and creatures. It was simply unimaginable. In the current situation, there was simply nowhere to run. They didn't seem to have any other choice other than to obediently surrender. Chapter 4052. Arbor put away her long sword and hugged the little white squirrel that had jumped into her arms. She slowly walked in front of the 3 archers and looked at them expressionlessly. "What other trump cards do you have? Take them all out at once." They had waited for her for so long in this commoner's little farmhouse courtyard. She didn't believe that these people didn't have a backup plan. Without a backup plan, it didn't seem like a trap set up by her old rival. Once this person made a move, it was very fierce. And after several exchanges, this person should have known long ago that with his abilities, these mere 500 people couldn't do anything to her. He shouldn't have done such a stupid and pointless thing. Emolien and Hu Shurchen had already searched the entire courtyard. At this time, they came out and shook their heads at her, indicating that they didn't find anything. 2 of the archers suddenly howled and were pulled over by a suction force in the air, landing in Hu Shurchen and Emolien's hands respectively. Arbor looked expressionlessly at the last archer standing in front of her and asked in a cold and calm voice, "Still not willing to speak? You, what do you want me to say?" That person couldn't stop trembling, clearly scared to the point of fainting. His gaze involuntarily drifted towards his two companions. At this time, their souls had already been searched. They sat on the ground like idiots with silly smiles on their faces. With this look, the hairs on this person's body stood on end and he couldn't stop trembling. A soul search was definitely the torture that every cultivator was most unwilling to experience. That person instinctively took a few steps back, his gaze turning from terror to calmness. Immediately after, a faint trace of madness appeared in his eyes. "You won't know how Master will deal with you next." His face started to twist crazily. "Even if you know how to tame beasts and kill all of us here, you won't be able to escape this inescapable net." Arbor's expressionless appearance seemed to provoke the man in front of her. He shouted harshly, "Why aren't you afraid?" Just now, he had been scared half to death because of those poisonous insects and scorpions. He felt that before he died, if he could see the stoic face in front of him reveal a terrified and uneasy expression, then he would truly be able to die in peace. Arbor's face was cold as he looked at Qinlai and said, "Are you talking about these seal arrays?" Arbor pointed at the crisscrossing confinement rune arrays that suddenly appeared above his head. A hint of mockery flashed in her eyes. "If that's all you have?" Arbor glanced at him indifferently. "Then you really can't deal with me." "Ha ha 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 ha." That man suddenly laughed crazily. He took out a jade talisman from his bosom and shouted, "What do you know? This farmhouse is surrounded by our people. We just need to wait for someone to send out the signal. Everyone would perish together." "Ha ha 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 ha," he yelled. "I then?" He looked at the little white squirrel that flew in front of him like lightning and snatched the jade talisman from his hand. It then jumped onto Arbor's shoulder. That person stood dumbfounded in shock. Suddenly, he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Shoot!" When a loud rumble sounded, Arbor raised her hand and created a gust of wind that pulled everyone and all the little beasts into Paradise Planet at an incredible speed. At the same time, the defensive wall that Emolien and Qinlai had set up outside suddenly collapsed. Countless divine stones were concentrated here by the bombardment. Chapter 4053. The skyrocketing tremors alarmed all the residents in the suburbs of the imperial capital. All the farmers in the village were in an uproar. The lights in every house were lit up. People put on their clothes and looked out of the windows. They saw flames soaring into the sky from the southeast. It was like a fire tornado. Smoke filled the air. Hearing the earth-shattering sounds of battle, the villagers were so frightened that they kept quiet out of fear. None of them dared to go out and look. They all shrunk back into their blankets, trembling in fear. Xiao Yi led several hundred Night Pavilion disciples and surged out from behind the divine stone cannons. They cut down anyone they saw as if they were chopping vegetables and melons, immediately killing the cannoneers who were caught off guard. There were a total of 12 divine stone cannons, all of which were aimed in the direction of the small farmhouse. After the sound of the cannons, the originally fine farmhouse had been razed to the ground. The people who fired the cannons and the guards totaled more than 300 people. They were all surrounded by the Night Pavilion disciples. Student Xiao Yi took the lead and slashed fiercely, directly cutting off one of the arms of one of the cannoneers. With a slap, he slapped him and his weapon to the ground. The Night Pavilion disciples swarmed forward and not only snatched the 12 divine stone cannons, they also chopped down all the black-clothed men who could. The remaining black-clothed men wanted to flee when they saw that the situation wasn't right, but they were also surrounded by a group of armored cavalry. Fong Su rushed over with 5,000 elite Greenwood guards. The crowd spread out and blocked off the black-clothed men's escape route. Without any explanation, they surrounded the Clear Sky sect disciples who were desperately trying to escape. From the beginning of the battle to the end, all the Clear Sky sect disciples were captured and pushed to the center of the encirclement with missing arms and legs. The horses neighed as the red-hot torches were ignited in the whistling night wind. In the pitch-black night, the torches formed a long, continuous dragon that was reflected on the windows of every house. All villagers, listen up. His Highness the Crown Prince is leading the troops to suppress the bandits. Don't be afraid and don't leave your houses for the time being. The bandits have been completely wiped out by us Greenwood guards. You won't be in any danger. Fong Su shouted loudly, his voice reaching all the villages in the suburbs. The commoners, who had been scared half to death, immediately let out a sigh of relief when they heard that the Crown Prince had come to suppress the bandits. Some of the braver ones couldn't help but lean against the window and look out, only to see that under the pitch-black night sky, there was a continuous stream of torches, and the shadows of the crowd were flickering in the wind. When Arbor's figure reappeared in the ruins of the farmhouse, Xiao Yi, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately came forward to greet him. Emolien also walked over unhurriedly. When he saw the residence that was filled with devastation, his lips hooked up in an extremely cold sneer. No wonder Jojo was so cautious. Her old rival really knew how to set up a series of traps. Her strategy was different from ordinary people. If someone else were here today, they would definitely be killed by the 12 cannons if they were caught like a turtle in a jar in the confinement rune array. Even if he used all his defensive spiritual artifacts to resist, even if he didn't die, he would still be severely injured. Your Highness, our brothers are waiting outside. Xiao Yi stepped forward and reported, all the Clear Sky sect disciples present are under control. Very good. Emolien nodded lightly and swept her gaze around in satisfaction. At this time, the Clear Sky sect archer in Jian Shurchen's hand was already trembling from head to toe. His entire body was covered in blood, and he looked battered and exhausted. Chapter 4054. Spirit, Spirit, Spirit. A spirit domain. A portable spirit domain. The archer's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. In a moment of desperation, Arbor had dragged him in as well. His other two companions, who had already become idiots, had already been turned into minced meat by the Godstone cannons. This person's expression was terrified. Just by looking at his expression, one could tell how shocked, anxious, and terrified he was right now. This little crown princess actually had a portable spirit domain. No wonder so many Godstone cannons had no effect on her at all. No matter how powerful the Godstone cannons were, what use were they if they hit an empty target? They were completely useless, okay? The man took a deep breath. His mind spun rapidly as he thought about how to leak this news. Damn it. No wonder Master had schemed to deal with her so many times but had never succeeded. This time, almost all the remaining forces of the Clear Sky sect had been gathered to launch the last fierce attack. However, they still failed. It wasn't that they were too weak, but that the other party was too strong. The other party actually had a portable spirit domain. No wonder she could summon so many sand scorpions and so many poisonous mosquitoes and birds. Don't kill me. I can tell you that Master has another stronghold here. This person trembled all over and hurriedly said, do you think I will believe you? Arbor looked at him coldly. She was looking at a corpse. Those who knew about the fact that she had a spirit domain with her were all her own people, or dead people who couldn't speak. As soon as he finished speaking, Hu Shurchen pressed down on his head without saying a word and searched his soul as usual. Then, with a wave of his finger, countless wooden thorns with barbs pierced into the man's body and twisted him into pieces. Xiao Yi secretly complained about how cruel it was. Lord Celestial Venerable had destroyed the person to the point that not even a trace of blood could be seen. It was truly an elegant and high-end technique. Let's go. Hu Shurchen turned around and nodded at the two. She led them out of the ruins and walked directly into the village. Bang! She kicked open a small courtyard door. Zhichun strode inside, and Xiao Mu and Emolien followed behind him. Behind them, Xiao Yi and Fong Su also led their people inside noisily. The small courtyard was immediately filled with people. He-chun led the group to a small backyard and pointed at the old willow tree in the corner of the yard. Dig it up. Everyone swung their hose with a series of banging sounds. A secret passageway appeared under the tree. Yuan Shurchen sighed and turned to Arbor. It's best not to have too much hope. This enemy is very smart. It seems that there won't be anyone too stupid among his subordinates. This place is surrounded by our men. The other party should have guessed that their whereabouts would be exposed tonight. Since he can't escape, he will probably... Once I die, I'll end my life with my secrets. As soon as Ji-chan finished speaking, everyone rushed into the cellar in front of them and saw a lifeless woman lying on the edge of a wooden table. Arbor curled his lips and revealed a strange expression. He walked forward and grabbed the woman's hair to make her look up. There were countless poisonous insects on the old woman's face. Her nose, eyes, and mouth had been completely gnawed away by the poisonous insects. She looked extremely disgusting and terrifying. You are indeed not an ordinary person to be so ruthless to yourself, Arbor said coldly without changing his expression. A soul-summoning talisman lit up on his fingertips. His eyes were deep and cold. Is death useful? Chapter 4055. As expected, this woman was extremely scheming. She knew that if those Clear Sky sect disciples were captured, one of them would definitely be forced to search their soul and expose her origins. At this time, the Crown Prince's troops had already surrounded the outside. If she rushed out, she would only expose her own identity. Thus, this woman went all out and swallowed poisonous insects and poisons, allowing these things to ruin her entire face. As a result, it was naturally impossible for others to easily recognize her identity. However, she didn't expect that in this world, there was a kind of almighty talisman master who could communicate with the power of heaven and earth and casually capture half of a person's soul after death. Of course, this method was very bad, because if an ordinary person died, their soul would definitely dissipate within 7 days. If her soul was forcefully extracted, it would definitely suffer the torment of being fried in boiling oil. After that, she would have to suffer the pain of her soul not dissipating for several days. The torment and pain of the soul was definitely not something a person's physical body could experience. Arbor wouldn't easily use this kind of talisman. However, this woman in front of her had a great enmity with her, so she couldn't be bothered to care whether she was dead or alive, whether she was in pain or suffering. The young crown princess raised a jade slip with her fingertips. With a flicker of light, a streak of light burrowed into the woman's blackened body. In a flash, an indistinct figure with an indistinct appearance floated up from the old woman's blackened body. At first, it was enveloped by a light barrier and looked around in confusion. When it saw Arbor and the other two standing in front of it, the soul involuntarily retreated. Arbor looked at her indistinct figure with an incomparably cold gaze and asked in a low voice, "Speak. Who are you and who is your master?" As soon as she finished speaking, a cluster of ice crystals suddenly jumped out of her fingers and turned into long ice needles. Arbor flipped her hand and pointed the needles at the woman's soul, emitting a faint silver light. Without waiting for the soul to speak, she flicked her finger, and dozens of long needles shot out with a whoosh. Ding, 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 ding. The long needles pierced through the body of the soul and directly nailed the dozen or so soft snakes that had crawled down the walls of the cellar to the ground. How dare you show off your petty tricks in front of this crown princess? Arbor coldly glanced at the woman's soul and raised another piece of jade. Normal practitioners are ineffective against soul attacks, but that doesn't mean I can't do anything to you, Arbor said coldly. If you don't answer me properly, I will keep your soul body captive and make you suffer the pain of thousands of arrows piercing your heart and lightning strikes for the rest of your life. Don't worry. As long as I want to, I can preserve your soul forever without any problems. Mo Lien and Yuan Shurchin could clearly see that the woman's soul trembled a few times as if she had received a shock. Of course, she was afraid. He felt an enormous fear towards the dark future. Now I'll let you suffer. Arbor waved his hand coldly. The talisman transformed into the power of thousands of arrows that pierced through the soul body's limbs and bones. Prince Mo and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal really didn't expect that a soul body could let out such a tearing scream. The woman's originally indistinct figure flickered slightly like a candle flame. Her entire body curled up into a ball in pain and fell to the ground, holding her head and trembling. Chapter 4056. Arbor raised another talisman jade slip and coldly looked at the woman in front of him without any emotion in his eyes. That extremely cold gaze fell into the eyes of a soul body. It was so cold that it was like a ghost that had walked out of hell. This little stoic girl was simply more like a ghost than a ghost. The soul trembled and watched as she raised her finger, seemingly about to activate another talisman attack. The woman shrieked in terror. Talisman Master! Great Talisman Master! Did Master know what kind of existence she had been chasing after all these years? You're right. Arbor looked at her indifferently and unhurriedly nodded. I am indeed a great Talisman Master. I can make your soul beg for death. The woman trembled in terror and buried her head in her body. She curled up and raised her hands, swaying repeatedly. Don't attack me, don't. Arbor's fingertip moved, and amidst the woman's shriek, a beam of talisman power passed through her body. The woman, who originally thought she would suffer the sin of having her heart pierced by 10,000 arrows, suddenly felt as if her entire body was warm, as if she was basking in the faint sunlight she hadn't seen in a long time. After the talisman power of the restoration talisman was injected, the transparent soul's pained expression receded slightly, and she felt a bit better. Don't worry, Arbor said coldly. I said I wouldn't let you die like this. Another jade talisman appeared in her hand, and the power of a lightning talisman could faintly be seen slowly moving within. Lightning guiding talisman. The old woman's body contorted, and she hastily knelt down and kowtowed. Spare me, spare me, spare me, Crown Princess, spare me. Who are you? Arbor asked with a chilly expression. I am Madame Long's personal servant, the old woman said while trembling. Xiao Xiao's surname is Wang. Everyone calls me Mammy Wang. Which Madame Long? Yes, Madame Long Shoshin of the imperial capital's Long family's branch family. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. After a while, he suddenly flung the lightning strike talisman in his hand, which attracted a bolt of heavenly lightning that exploded on the old woman's left hand. Ah! The sizzling power of the thunder curse spread through her soul. It was so painful that she almost doubted her life. It was too painful. It was really too painful. That kind of painful feeling was really indescribable. Arbor glanced at her and continued, Are you still unwilling to tell the truth? If the dictum talisman could be used on souls as well, it wouldn't be so troublesome now. Emolienne walked to her side and took her little hand. She glanced at the woman indifferently. Do you think it's fine to push all the blame onto the Long family? The branch of the Long family can be considered to have escaped from the divine prefecture. But if we really want to capture them, it won't be that troublesome. It was just that there was no need for that at the moment. The soul trembled again, and then said in a weak voice, I'll tell you everything. I'm begging the Crown Princess to give me a quick death. I only know that the person who has been contacting me is an old nanny surnamed Zhang. She really is the old nanny by Madame Long's side. If you don't believe me, you can check it out. Her surname is Zhang, and her name is Zhang Huilan. You're very generous. You gave me spirit coins to do something. The woman with the surname Wang screamed when she saw Arbor raise his hand. Chapter 4057. He curled up on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. The woman hurriedly poured out everything she knew like beans from a bamboo tube. It's really Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess. This old servant is telling the truth. She hurriedly said, A while ago, this Granny Zhang even came to find me and gave me a large sum of money to do something at the Kaidai Pavilion. Arbor's eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at her coldly. Speak clearly. Yes. The old woman hurriedly explained everything from beginning to end. It turned out that it was this old woman who had worn the Zhang Fua mask, disguised as a man, and instigated the Zhang family to carry their second son's corpse to the Kaidai Pavilion to cause trouble. Arbor sneered. Then you were also the one who poisoned the 8 members of the Zhang family to death in prison? The old woman immediately shook her head in fright. No, Crown Princess, this old servant didn't do it. This old servant only accepted Zhang Huilan's mission and went to find the Zhang family's old madam. I told them about this matter and gave them a sum of money. Apart from that, this old servant really didn't do anything. It's true. It's absolutely true. The old woman knelt and begged for mercy, kowtowing repeatedly. Arbor's cold gaze swept over her, and he didn't speak for a long time. A faint trace of disappointment flitted through her eyes, and she asked in a low voice, "How do you usually communicate with Zhang Huilan?" I have a jade talisman for communication. It's buried in that crack in the wall. Where is that Zhang Huilan right now? She followed the long family and ran away, the woman said shakily. In other words, no one can prove whether what you're saying right now is true or false. Xiao Mu sneered, throwing her a gaze that was as chilly as a snowy soul. What I've said, every word of it it's true. Little grand aunt, I don't dare to lie to you. As he spoke, a shadow flashed at the entrance of the cellar. Stay up late and a few night pavilion disciples walked over, each carrying a person. Everyone bowed toward Emolien and Xiao Mu in greeting. Aoyi said with a chuckle, "Crown Prince Consort, we've captured them." As soon as they finished speaking, a few trembling figures were thrown to the ground by their hands. They fell to the ground in front of the little crown princess. The woman's shadow, which was originally huddled together, suddenly stood up. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws, and was about to charge forward. But in an instant, she was frozen in place by a body-securing talisman. "Spare my life! Spare my life!" 4 or 5 people were crawling on the ground. They were in a sorry state and were only wearing underwear. It was obvious that these people had been dragged out of their beds and brought here. There were men and women, young men and women, as well as 13 or 14-year-old boys and girls trembling in fear. "Granny Wang, I, the Crown Princess, saw that you were lonely on the road to the Yellow Springs, so I brought your family here." Arbor's eyes were cold, and his voice was indifferent. "How about I send your family to the Yellow Springs to accompany you?" No. The Wang woman finally knew fear. Her entire shadow trembled like a sieve, and she couldn't stop shaking. "No, Crown Princess, you can't do this." "Why can't I do it?" The little Crown Princess coldly interrupted her. "Humph, you smelly bugs. Every day you think of ways to make my life difficult. Now you know fear?" Chapter 4058. Heh! The little stoic's voice was extremely bleak and apathetic. "How about I let you all have a taste of drifting in the void for several hundred years?" She raised a blue flame in her hand and aimed it at the people kneeling on the ground. She berated harshly, "If you don't speak, then all of you can die." "No, don't." Madame Wang let out a high-pitched shriek. "This old servant is willing to speak. Willing to speak. Willing to say anything. I beseech the Crown Princess to be magnanimous and let off my family's juniors." Arbor's apathetic gaze turned towards her. "That Zhang Huilan, I know. She didn't escape with the Long clan. Instead, she was taken to a big aristocratic family. Although they did these things behind my back, I still discovered some clues. That Zhang Huilan is in contact with the Mu family." "The Mu family?" Yes, it's that talisman patrician family, the Mu family." Arbor's eyes narrowed slightly. After circling back and forth for so long, why did it circle back to the Mu family? "Every word I said is the truth. I dare to swear on my soul that if I deceive the Crown Princess even half a sentence, I will be struck by lightning and have my soul scattered. I won't even be able to be a pig, a cow, or a lamb in my next life." As expected, it was a very vicious oath. Arbor swept her a cold glance and said with a nod, "Remember what you said today." After saying this, he stored the soul into a storage talisman with a wave of his hand. Arbor glanced coldly at the men and women pretending to be quails on the ground and walked out without a word. "Let them go after we verify whether her words are true or false." Aoyi waved his hand, and someone escorted the wailing men and women away. This old ghost was very crafty. Even at this time, she still wanted to swear loyalty to her master. Unfortunately, as long as the night pavilion targeted someone, it was impossible to not know their identity and background. Is she telling the truth? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal turned to look at Mo Lien and asked, "Is half true and half false?" Prince Mo sighed. Oh, at this juncture, she still dares to not tell the truth? That old scoundrel definitely knows more than just this. Jojo is still too soft-hearted. A cold light flashed in Mo Lien's eyes, and her sight fell on the storage amulet that contained Wang Mama. The storage talisman trembled, and his father's extremely faint figure immediately fell down. Trembling, he knelt on the ground. Before Mo Lien could say anything, she kowtowed and said, "Your Highness, this old servant is speaking the truth." This old servant has already. Mo Lien waved her hand, and Stay Up Late came in with a tray. There were 2 bloody fingers on it. Ah! The old woman's face, which was like an afterimage, twisted with all her might. It's just 2 fingers now. Mo Lien curled her lips mockingly. Perhaps in less than a quarter of an hour it will be an arm or an eyeball. You're very good. You fooled my Jojo. Mo Lien looked at her indifferently and said, "You know that the crown princess won't really do anything to your family. You've figured out her personality very well. Yes, the crown princess won't take her anger out on your family." Mo Lien smiled and nodded at her. She inched closer to the old woman and said in an extremely faint voice, "I will. My babies, my mother fell and fractured her bones. I've been accompanying her in bed since last night." Chapter 4059. What was the use of torturing this shrew? Only by torturing what she cared about, and what she cared about would she tell him everything honestly. Wasn't that so? To him, reputation and whatnot were not as important as his Jojo. This old shrew was willing to commit suicide for her master and didn't hesitate to die in such a gruesome manner. She didn't even care about her dignity. Why did she do it? Wasn't it because she wholeheartedly wanted to protect the person behind her? In this way, only by using a heavy hand on her would she be able to reveal something useful to them. Oyi sat down at the table and took out a pen. He recorded everything the elderly woman said under the dim light in the cellar. Line by line, Prince Mo asked, and the elderly woman answered. She was very tactful and didn't leave out any details. Right now, elderly Lady Wang was very clear that as long as she left out half a sentence or said something that didn't satisfy His Highness the Crown Prince, she might be able to receive her grandchildren's hands or legs again very soon. Husband. Arbor went up to get some fresh air but didn't see Mo Lien and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal coming up, so he dashed back into the cellar. However, he saw Mo Lien and Ma Yechen walking over. Mo Lien smiled faintly and pulled her small hand over, stuffing a piece of paper into her small hand. "Write it all down. See if it's useful." Sir Jojo looked down and flipped open the paper, reading each line one by one. The more he read, the deeper and more terrifying the chill in his eyes became. In the end, it was so intense that water was about to drip out. So it was this person. Who had been scheming in the dark all this time, constantly clinging on to her and wanting her to lose everything. The little stoic looked unperturbed on the surface, but she had already meticulously linked and calculated everything that had happened from the lower star domain to the middle 6 prefectures, and then to the upper 3 provinces in her mind. The more she thought, the more apprehensive she became. Her eyes were like ice soul frost pearls, emitting a sharp and cold glint. To think that he had hidden himself so deeply that he had even managed to conceal himself from her time and time again. "Let's go to Mu. Reporting to Your Highness, the Crown Princess." Xiao Yi rushed over and cupped his hands. The Mu family's main house in the Winter Moon Mountain Forest was attacked by an unknown assassin. The entire Mu family is now resisting the enemy. Eldest young Master Mu seems to have suffered some minor injuries. Arbor was taken aback as he thought, "That's right. Brother should have reached sovereign capital a long time ago. Last time, when Tianyun attacked the Mu family hid in the tunnels. Who would have thought that not long after they would come again? Does Tianyun really want the Mu family's talisman technique? Or some people have been coveting the Mu family's talisman technique for a long time. Arbor clenched her fist and held the piece of paper tightly in her hand. She looked up at Emolien, who was smiling at her, and said, "Let's go." The latter naturally nodded. The group of people quietly left the farm. Emolien arranged for Fong Su to lead a part of the Greenwood Guards to pacify the people. The rest followed Ao Yi, Xiao Yi, and the other Night Pavilion disciples to Winter Moon Mountain Forest together with Prince Mo and the Little Crown Princess. Under the heavy night sky, the sounds of battle shook the sky in Winter Moon Mountain Forest. Blood had already flowed like a river at the Mu family's entrance. Compared to the previous night attack, the Mu family's casualties were obviously more disastrous this time. Even the Mu family's old patriarch didn't expect that Tian Yun would make a comeback after just a few days and attack them again. And what shocked them the most was Chapter 4060. The person who led the team to the Mu residence to kill them was actually their former Mu family head. Mu Jingfeng. Peft. Mu Jingshua spat out a mouthful of blood, nonchalantly wiping the blood off his face. His eyes stared fixedly at the familiar figure standing at the Mu family's mountain entrance with his hands behind his back, and he could not help but burst into wild laughter. Mu Jingfeng, I really didn't expect that the one who brought people from the heavenly fate realm to harm our family was actually you. Mu Jingfeng, are you still human? You actually... An elder was only halfway through his words when he suddenly realized that Mu Jingfeng was swatting a palm at him. A bolt of lightning struck the elder's body with the force of a thunderbolt. His upper body was instantly broken, and his entire body was like a book. With a crack, he was slammed shut by a palm. Seeing that Mu family elder's death was especially gruesome, the other elders' expressions immediately changed drastically. Mu Jingshua sternly shouted, "Everyone, don't be courteous with him. Attack together." Several elders of the Mu family timidly took 2 steps back. The remaining 5 elders, including Elder Dao and Elder Du, quickly followed Mu Jingzhuang and rushed forward. Heh! Mu Jingfeng stood with his hands behind his back, assuming the posture of an expert as he cast a sidelong glance at everyone. With a wave of his palm, he sent out another wave of lightning spiritual energy. Sizzling sounds were heard, and countless bolts of lightning burrowed into an elder's body like thin snakes. It instantly caused the elder to wail miserably. Everyone could not help but shudder. They saw that elder's body seemed to be grabbed by a force as he floated up into the air. Countless snake-like lightning bolts flowed through his limbs and bones, ultimately converging on his face and head. "Elder!" Mu Jingshua roared, his eyes about to pop out of their sockets. Sizzling sounds could be heard coming from that elder's face as countless electric currents twisted under the skin on his face like snakes. Not long after, with a pop, his face exploded, and his facial features were instantly destroyed by the power of lightning. His flesh and blood were badly mangled, and his entire face was flattened by the explosion. The disciples of the Mu family shuddered in unison. They clenched the weapons in their hands and involuntarily took a few steps back. Mu Dongni suddenly jumped up from the back of the crowd and roared in exasperation, "Brother, are you crazy? How could you? Halfway through her words, Mu Dongni met Mu Jingfeng's gaze. That incomparably cold gaze made her feel suffocated, and she couldn't help but shudder. Terrifying. She had never seen such a heartless and terrifying expression on Mu Jingfeng's face. Was this still the same big brother of the family head who always put the family above everything else and regarded the family as more important than the sky? No, this wasn't Mu Jingfeng at all, right? How could a person change so much in such a short period of time? And what was going on with his body? How could he suddenly stand up and possess such great strength? The power of lightning in his body was also very strange. She remembered that her elder brother had never comprehended the lightning spirit of the 5 spirits before. What was going on? Now, even this child, Xingqian, was no match for his father. She remembered that in the past, Xingqian's strength could absolutely crush her elder brother. Mu Dongni was flabbergasted. She braced herself and could not help but ask, "Big brother, what's going on with you?" Hee hee. Mu Jingfeng let out a very strange laugh. Chapter 4061. It was completely different from the way he usually spoke. Mu Jingfeng's cold eyes stared fixedly at Mu Dongni and the others. Everyone felt their hair stand on end from his gaze, not daring to breathe loudly. Kill! Mu Jingfeng suddenly raised his hand and issued an iron-blooded order to the numerous Heavenly Fate members behind him. Everyone from the Heavenly Fate sect was wrapped in diagonally hanging black robes. A crescent moon was embroidered on the corner of each robe with silver thread. Clearly, this was the symbol of one of the Heavenly Fate sect's halls. However, under such circumstances, no one paid attention to these marks. Every member of the Mu family was forced to gather all the strength they could to fight against the members of Heavenly Fate that Mu Jingfeng had brought with him. There was no other reason. If they didn't fight, then they could only wait for death. Mu Jingfeng coldly stared at them, as if they weren't his family but a bunch of weak ants. His lips curled into a mocking and callous smile, and his eyes faintly flickered with 2 balls of black mist. Kill! With that order, all the disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect charged towards the Mu family at an extremely fast speed. Mu Xingqian drew a spiritual fire in his palm and rustled it into the crowd. The fire spirit wall enveloped several Mu family members around him. At the same time, countless blue talismans flew out of Mu Xingqian's body and whooshed forward, forming a thick defensive shield. Insignificant skill. A trace of anger flitted across Mu Jingfeng's eyes, and he suddenly raised his hand and pointed. More than a dozen attack talismans, also imbued with talisman energy, whooshed into the air. They hit the defensive shield in front of Mu Xingqian by a hair's breadth. Under this attack, the talisman arrays on both sides emitted a long buzzing sound. Mu Xingqian's defensive shield was instantly broken by the attack talismans. Mu Jingfeng's maniacal laughter filled their ears. Ha 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 ha! I did it! I did it! I'm an Earth Stage Great Talisman Master. Ha 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 ha! I've finally become an Earth Stage Great Talisman Master. Everyone's gazes couldn't help but slightly focus. Elder Dao couldn't help but tighten his grip on his weapon. An Earth Stage Great Talisman Master? What kind of terrifying existence was this? In the entire Mu family's several hundred years, the number of Earth-grade Great Talisman Masters could be counted on one's fingers. Mu Jingfeng, that vile spawn, was actually a step ahead of others and advanced into the ranks of Earth-grade Great Symbol Masters? Bastard! A furious roar pierced through everyone's heads. Mu Xingqian clutched his chest, forcibly suppressing a mouthful of blood. Looking back, he saw his grandfather, Mu Tsong, leading more than a dozen Mu family elders, quickly moving towards them. Beast, why aren't you stopping? Mu Tsong coldly glared at Mu Jingfeng, his eyes full of disappointment and hatred. Who would have thought that his eldest son, who was so outstanding when he was young, would actually end up in such a state with the Mu family? He actually led people to attack my family. How much does he hate my family? Mu Jingfeng's eyes revealed a trace of hatred as he pointed at Mu Tsong and scolded. You still dare to put on airs in front of me at a time like this? Why are you looking at me like that? This father of his, there was not a single thing that he was satisfied with. Every time, he would look at her with a look of utter disappointment, as if she was nothing more than a bug in a manure pit, completely unworthy of his attention. He hated it too much. He hated his father's heartlessness, stripping him of his position as the family head. Chapter 4062. He hated even more the person who had crippled him and forced him to step onto this underworld path. That's right, he hated them. He came to take revenge on them. However, that little bastard was truly the most hateful. However, he brought people to attack the Mu family this time. Even if he captured everyone in the Mu family, he probably wouldn't let that little bastard submit. After all, this little bastard was incomparably cold and heartless from the bottom of his heart to the depths of his bones. She would not sacrifice her own interests for these Mu family members. Mu Jingfeng narrowed his eyes and coldly stared at family head Mu. If you're willing to hand over the talisman remnant scroll, I can still spare your lives. Big brother, don't keep making mistakes. Mu Dongni could not help but cry out. I'm doing this because you're forcing me. Mu Jingfeng sternly looked at everyone, his face contorted malevolently. Xingqian, go to the ancestral hall and bring the talisman remnant scroll to father. Mu Xingqian coldly looked at the man in front of him, as though it was his first time meeting this person. His eyes did not have the slightest bit of warmth for a son respecting his father as he coldly said, "Dream on." Ha! Ha 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 ha! Mu Jingfeng's face contorted as he laughed heartily. Men, smash the Mu family's ancestral hall for me. Mu Jingfeng's face was frosty as he gave the order. Use this jade talisman to break the array in the ancestral hall. Bastard! Countless Mu family disciples and elders were visibly moved as they glared angrily at Mu Jingfeng's crazy behavior. This was too crazy. As a member of the Mu family, this Mu Jingfeng could actually do such an inhumane thing. Fight it out with them. Mu Jingshua angrily shouted with reddened eyes as he flew toward Mu Jingfeng. You're courting death. Mu Jingfeng sternly shouted and raised his hand to slap Mu Jingshua's chest. With a crack, Mu Jingshua's sternum was shattered by his palm. He flew backward and fell heavily to the ground. Mu Jingshua spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, instantly losing consciousness. Jingshua, shouted Patriarch Mu angrily. He turned his head and looked at the ancestral hall. A group of heavenly fate disciples was indeed running in that direction. Mu Jingfeng chuckled. Since you won't give it to me, then I can only personally bring my men over to get it. Ah! Several disciples of the Mu family who had come forward to intercept the heavenly fate sect were chopped to the ground. They could only watch as hundreds and thousands of heavenly fate sect disciples in black robes ran towards the ancestral hall. Smash it for me! Mu Jingfeng bellowed. All the disciples of the All-Fate sect swarmed forward and smashed the tablets in the ancestral hall. The disciples of the Mu family rushed over, but the ancestral hall was originally only so big. In addition, everyone was crowded there, so they couldn't play at all. As soon as the battle broke out, half of the ancestral hall was affected by the power of the battle and collapsed with a rumble. When Arbor arrived, he saw this scene. Her mother's memorial tablet was held in her big brother's arms. Her big brother's chest was stained with blood, and he was currently fighting with two Tian Yun subleaders. From the looks of it, he was at a disadvantage. Who dares to disturb my mother's rest? Arbor's voice was ice-cold. All of you can die for me. Boom! A ball of divine power unexpectedly exploded in the middle of the group of heavenly fate disciples. The divine power ball with a large area of destruction instantly blasted many heavenly fate sect disciples into pieces. Wails of agony filled the air. The 8th night watch ends. I'm sleeping soundly. I'm exhausted. Chapter 4063. Little bastard. Mu Jingfeng had just let out a curse when he saw a black flame heading straight for his face. It was fast, so fast that it was practically impossible to dodge. Mu Jingfeng's expression changed slightly. He only had time to apply 7 to 8 defensive talismans on himself before colliding with that black flame. He was instantly engulfed by the black flame and sent flying. Mu Jingfeng simply did not dare to believe his eyes. He was actually sent flying by someone else's black flame. When his body landed heavily on the ground and he heard a crisp sound coming from his back, he belatedly realized that he had been knocked to the ground by someone. How is this possible? He had already risen to become a 6th-level God tier master. Alright, that was why he could crush Mu Xingqian and most of the people in the Mu family. But now, he was actually crawling on the ground like a dead dog. He completely did not dare to believe that he had actually been hit by someone and was lying on the ground again. No, that's impossible. That's impossible. Mu Jingfeng lay on the ground and shook his head repeatedly. He absolutely did not believe that he could not get up again. That was impossible. He had barely stood up for a day. He had suffered so much pain and experienced so many hardships before he could finally recover his strength and was even more powerful than before. He had stood up. He had brought so many disciples of the heavenly fate realm back to the Mu family to crush these Mu family members who had once stripped him of his position as family head and trampled on him. But now he was completely crushed by a person who didn't even see his hand gesture clearly. Arbor did not care about how Mu Jingfeng, who was lying on the ground and could not help but curl up from the pain in his back, was doing right now. She only knew that Mu Jingfeng had brought so many disciples of the heavenly fate realm to smash the Mu family's ancestral hall for his own selfish desires. He had even almost smashed her mother's memorial tablet. Just based on this point alone, it would not be enough even if he died 10,000 times. You guys are truly disgusting. Arbor coldly stared at the group of black-robed people standing in front of her. With a wave of her small hand, a blue spark slowly ignited. You dare to come and smash my mother's ancestral hall. I'll let you filthy creatures in the corners never reincarnate. Her voice was abnormally cold. Although her tone was extremely calm and unhurried, the words that came out of her mouth made people shiver uncontrollably. It was bone-chilling. Everyone's hearts couldn't help but tremble slightly, and there was a hint of fear in their eyes. Arbor raised his hand, only to see the blue spark floating on his fingertips ignite a beautiful arc in the air. Mu Jingfeng was sprawled on the ground. He was in so much pain that he couldn't stop moving his body as he bellowed, "Disperse! Spread out!" All the disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect were startled, but they obeyed the order and quickly spread out. At the same time, the blue sparks in Arbor's hand were already falling from the sky. Countless beautiful blue flowers bloomed like fireworks, crackling and bursting, rustling and falling into the crowd. The moment a disciple of the Heavenly Fate sect was hit by the blue sparks, blood immediately blossomed. Mu Jingfeng's back was severely injured, and he could not get up for a while. He could only move his body bit by bit, wanting to get away from the blue flames. Chapter 4064. However, these little blue flames attacked indiscriminately. Mu Jingfeng was sprawled on the ground, so it was difficult for him to move, so it was naturally difficult for him to avoid being hit. After several blue flames exploded on his body in succession, Mu Jingfeng couldn't help but snort angrily. He shouted sternly, "Arbor, you unfilial daughter. You actually dare to treat your father like this." Arbor turned a deaf ear to this person's clamor. Blue spiritual cleansing fire poured out endlessly, and countless blue flames blotted out the sky and formed a nebula in midair. With a light tug from the little stoic's slender hand, they abruptly plummeted downwards. The blue flames seemed to be sentient and smashed towards the black-robed people as if they had grown eyes. In the blink of an eye, they had already smashed a dozen or so Heavenly Fate disciples to the ground. When the surrounding Mu clan disciples heard this, their spirits were greatly roused, and they each gripped their spirit weapons and fought back with all their might. If they didn't counterattack now, what were they waiting for? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and they wouldn't have another chance if they missed it. At this time, the Mu clan disciples were also riled up by the killing. There was no need for Mu Jingyuan and the others to command them. These Mu clan disciples automatically formed small teams and cooperated with each other to charge at those unlucky black-robed people of the Heavenly Fate sect. Although the Mu clan disciples weren't very cooperative, fortunately, both sides were actually completely exhausted after a round of fighting. The Heavenly Fate sect's people were being suppressed by the little crown princess's group, so how could they exert even half of their strength? Hence, the Mu clan disciples seized this opportunity to swiftly counterattack. They didn't care about any order or morality as they ganged up on one person and beat them up violently until they annihilated them. Arbor looked on coldly from the sidelines. He stood outside the crowd and slowly walked towards Mu Xingqian. Along the way, not a single Heavenly Fate sect disciple dared to rush in front of her to court death. In reality, she didn't even need to lift a finger if there were any blind people who wanted to jump in front of her. Emolian, Hichan, and the others would have dealt with them remotely long ago from 3 feet away. With an icy expression, the little crown princess stepped on the blood-soaked ground and slowly arrived in front of Mu Xingqian. She reached out to take her mother's memorial tablet from him. "Jojo!" Mu Xingqian heaved a sigh of relief, but before he could say anything, she flicked a healing pill into his mouth. Arbor lowered his head slightly, revealing half of his slender white neck. Her eyes were extremely focused as she slowly took out a handkerchief from her sleeve and carefully wiped the 2 drops of blood on the memorial tablet. She carefully cleaned it up and gently stroked the spirit tablet with her small hand. As he turned around, he said coldly with an indifferent expression, "Kill them all on the spot. We don't need anyone alive." Yes. Countless black shadows obeyed the order and rushed into the battle circle. They caught the black-robed man and chopped his head with 3 sabers and 2 swords. Countless unlucky disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect immediately fell to the ground, unable to get up. The disciples of the Mu family held the swords in their hands and retreated to the side in a daze. Because there was no need for these weak chickens to make a move. The underworld court guards took over the mission of killing him, and they acted quickly and decisively. In less than a moment, they eliminated more than half of the Heavenly Fate sect disciples as if they were chopping vegetables. An underworld court guard kicked away a Heavenly Fate sect disciple beside him. As he turned around, the sharp edge of his sword sliced open the throat of a black-robed man behind him. The cold light flashed past as fast as lightning, dazzling everyone's eyes. Chapter 4065. A head was sent flying into the distance. The Nether Court guards were well-trained and moved extremely quickly. Every one of them controlled their divine power and attached it to their spirit weapons. They never wasted their energy hitting the other party's limbs and only focused on chopping off the head. What was the use of a Providence disciple if you didn't chop off his head? So what if you only hit his limbs? He could still move no matter how crippled he was. The Mu family disciples were all dumbstruck at this moment, and many of them looked down at their hands in a daze. Just a moment ago, they were still being beaten to a pulp by these crooked cultivators and were practically powerless to retaliate. After the young crown princess led her men over, the situation immediately reversed. What kind of strength and influence was this? No one wanted to admit that they were weak, but this was the reality. Compared to these well-trained soldiers, their Mu family disciples were truly a sheet of loose sand. No wonder the young crown princess looked down on them back then. When the Mu family elders thought of this, they couldn't help but exchange glances and sigh quietly. Reporting to the crown princess. Another court guard swiftly arrived in front of the young crown princess and reported with a salute. The Providence disciples have all retreated to the rear court. After them, Arbor ordered coldly, "Kill them all." Yes. Arbor looked back at his eldest brother, who was slowly recovering, and said with a nod, "If there's nothing else, come with us." Mu Xingqian nodded and caught up with the little fellow. Mu Xingqian was extremely silent the entire way. If it weren't for the little stoic glancing back from time to time, it really would be very difficult to sense his fluctuating aura. "You're upset?" Mu Xingqian maintained his silence, but his tightly clenched fists that were pressed against his sides repeatedly demonstrated how terrible his current mood was. "Because your father brought people to smash the Mu residence and kill the Mu family clansmen?" Mu Xingqian abruptly looked up at her, a trace of pain and anguish in his eyes. "Jojo, he's also your father." "Heh!" Arbor let out an indifferent sneer. After a while, that cold voice sounded in Mu Xingqian's ears. "She's not anymore." Mu Xingqian's heart trembled. He glanced sideways at her, only to see an indifferent expression on her cold little face. This was true indifference. There was not the slightest fluctuation in her emotions. It was as if Mu Jingfeng was just a stranger to her. In fact, this was indeed the case. To Jojo, Mu Jingfeng had never fulfilled his duty as a father. When Jojo was struggling to survive in the lower star field, what was Mu Jingfeng doing? He spent Long Chuyun's dowry, ate delicacies, and raised a charming mistress. He enjoyed all the glory, splendor, and wealth. He was of no help to Jojo at all. Even after Jojo returned to Shenzhou, if he was willing to show a trace of kindness to Jojo, perhaps the father and daughter would not have ended up like this. No, there was nothing. Mu Jingfeng probably only coveted Jojo, spied on her, and used her. He coveted her talisman technique secrets and wanted to constantly spy on her. He wanted to use her identity as the crown princess to obtain some benefits. He had never treated her sincerely, so why should Jojo reciprocate with sincerity? Mu Xingqian heaved a long sigh. It was no wonder Jojo disliked him so much. After all, there was a cause for an effect. Everyone chased after the Heavenly Fate sect disciples and flew to the backyard. Chapter 4066. Who would have thought that the moment they stepped through the backyard's arched door, they would hear a sweet laughter. Heh. I advise you not to act recklessly. The soft voice was carried by the wind into everyone's ears. Mu Xingqian and the rest stopped in their tracks as they stood at the arched door and looked inside. Over 300 black-robed Heavenly Fate sect disciples came out from one end of the garden and surrounded a red-clothed beauty like stars drying the moon. That beauty wore a thin and soft satin dress with a bow tied at her chest. Her dress was loose, revealing half of her round shoulders. Thorny Rose, Mu Jingfeng called out with slight excitement. He did not expect that Vice Hall Master Thorny Rose would also come. Then, there was definitely hope for him. However, that woman called Thorny Rose merely cast a sidelong glance at him and immediately revealed an extremely disdainful expression. Why are you paralyzed again? Thorny Rose sneered and shook her head mockingly. You're really too weak. You're always paralyzed on the ground and can't get up. How are you going to work for our organization like this? Mu Jingfeng's complexion immediately turned green and white from this woman's disdain. He was indeed in a very sorry state right now. Mu Jingfeng, whose back was in incessant pain, simply could not stand on his own. At this moment, he was being supported by 2 Heavenly Fate sect disciples and could barely stand there. Although he was very angry inside, he still had to pretend to be a grandson and smile obsequiously. Yes, it's my fault. I underestimated this group of Mu family members too much. Jingfeng, Elder Mu was furious, his pair of ox-like eyes practically popping out of their sockets. Look at this good son of his with that flattering appearance. Was this still the once awe-inspiring Mu family's previous patriarch? Don't call me that. Mu Jingfeng angrily glared at Mu Tsong, his eyes brimming with hatred and anger. If you truly had the slightest bit of familial affection for me, you wouldn't have caused me to be in this state today. The Mu family's first elder's face darkened, and he could not help but sneer mockingly. Why don't you find the reason from yourself? Why did Ancestor Zhaoyang change your position as patriarch? This shows that you simply don't have the ability to sit in this position. Shut up! Mu Jingfeng screamed, his entire body trembling in agitation. The 2 Heavenly Fate disciples who were supporting him were already exhausted after the battle. At this moment, Mu Jingfeng's entire body was trembling and struggling, and they nearly failed to support him. Mu Jingfeng hurriedly turned to look in Thorn's direction and begged with a fawning expression. Vice Hall Master, please give me another bottle of recovery medicine. I will cherish it this time. I won't let myself fall again. Humph. Thorny Rose let out a cold snort from her nose. Clearly, she disapproved of his words. Emolien and He Chun frowned and couldn't help but look at each other. They both had some doubts in their hearts. Recovery potion? From Mu Jingfeng's tone, it seemed to be very magical. However, he and He Chun were very clear that Emolien's attack had completely destroyed Mu Jingfeng's lumbar bones. Logically speaking, if Mu Jingfeng did not have a peerless doctor like Jojo to treat him in this lifetime, there should be no possibility for him to stand up. However, from his words, it seemed that he was very confident in this recovery potion and felt that once he consumed it, he would immediately be able to move again. Please, Vice Hall Master Thorny Rose. Mu Jingfeng flattered. Chapter 4067. For the sake of that bottle of recovery medicinal liquid, Mu Jingfeng did not hesitate to crawl over while trembling in front of everyone, completely throwing his dignity to the back of his mind. The group of Mu family's disciples simply looked at each other in dismay, their eyes revealing disbelief. Was this kind of person really their former family head? Why you bastard! Elder Mu Tsong was so angry that his face turned slightly pale, and his lips could not help but tremble. Matriarch Mu sighed and walked to Elder Mu's side. She raised her hand and stroked his chest. Old master, don't be too agitated. Mu Jingfeng was now willing to submit to Tianyun. He truly did not care about his own face at all. In front of everyone in the family, his disgraceful behavior was simply unbearable to watch. She stepped on Mu Jingfeng's head, which was lying in front of her, with her bare feet. "All right, seeing that you're so tactful, I'll give you another chance." Thank you. Thank you, Vice Hall Master Tu Wei." Mu Jingfeng raised his head in pleasant surprise and reverently held up the other party's foot with both hands. Arbor expressionlessly watched everything unfold before him. He was unlike the other Mu family members, whose eyes revealed resentment, anger, shame, and humiliation. She did not have any expression and merely watched indifferently from a bystander. She watched as the stinking bug consumed the medicinal liquid that the woman threw to him. She watched as he ecstatically poured it into his mouth. She watched as his body curled up in pain, rolling back and forth on the ground while howling angrily. She watched as he carelessly gnawed on the soil in the garden like a pitiful bug. His fingernails dug into his skin, until his palms were drenched in blood and not a single piece of flesh was left intact. In the end, the disheveled Mu Jingfeng finally stood up. However, his face seemed to have slimmed down and aged quite a bit. His entire person was even more emaciated. Arbor shook his head. This recovery medicinal liquid should be one of the improved medicinal liquids produced by Tianyun. Due to the black crystal controlling their consciousness, as long as their heads weren't chopped off, their bodies could still twist and shake no matter how serious their injuries were. Even if it couldn't walk upright, it could still crawl like a snake or twist like a worm. This kind of recovery medicine was a kind of medicine that allowed the members of the Sky Fate organization to get up, no matter how serious their injuries were. It sounded miraculous, but it was only a kind of medicinal liquid that treated the symptoms but not the root of the problem. A body that had recovered so quickly. Had it really recovered? Not at all. For example, Mu Jingfeng's back had suffered such a serious injury. Would he really recover after taking the recovery medicine? No, his bones were still broken, and his meridians were still in a mess. This kind of medicinal liquid only allowed him to have a final radiance of the setting sun for a short period of time. To put it bluntly, he was depriving Mu Jingfeng of his 5 senses and 6 senses. His nerves could no longer feel pain. He was no longer human. Previously, when she saw Mu Jingfeng struggling on the ground, she had been giggling non-stop. Now that she saw Elder Mu Tsang's face full of anger and wanted to surround them with people, she could not help but sneer. "I advise you to take a good look before making a move." This woman smiled at Elder Mu with certainty. She then waved her hand and had people escort the group of women from the rear residence forward. Chapter 4068. The first to bear the brunt was Madame Mu, who was tied up at the front, as well as the 5th branch's Madame Hua, the 4th branch's 5th Miss Mu Rakan, and several other female members of the Mu family. Mu Qingya's face was slightly pale as she looked at Mu Jingfeng, who was in a sorry state. It was obvious that she had seen the scene just now. At this moment, her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at her husband with hidden bitterness, as though she was very distressed by his changes. Her tears silently flowed down drop by drop. "Old Master, save us, Old Master." The group of weeping women, who were detained by the All-Fate sect's disciples, cried and begged for mercy one after another. Matriarch Mu's expression changed slightly. Ever since the incident, she had been protected by Old Master Mu's people. At that time, they had also sent people to the inner residence to search for the other family members. However, the Mu family's branches lived rather far away in the entire Winter Moon Mountain forest, so they couldn't immediately inform all the women to leave. Matriarch Mu only led people to save a portion of them. She didn't expect the rest to be captured by the enemy. Seeing these delicate granddaughters, who were originally raised in the boudoir and had no cultivation, fall into the hands of the enemy, Matriarch Mu's heart seemed to bleed, and the rims of her eyes turned red. "What exactly do you want?" "Matriarch, you're a reasonable person." Shin Qianwei giggled. "We've already told you the purpose of our trip. Hand over the talisman fragments in the ancestral hall, and we can consider letting you go." Actually, we really don't want to be enemies with the Mu family. Matriarch Mu sneered. Before she could speak, Fifth Miss Mu rockin' coldly said, Grandpa, Father, you don't have to do anything to humiliate the Mu family for me. What's there to be afraid of in death? Mu rockin' coldly said, It's just slap. Before she could finish speaking, she received a heavy slap to the face. Mu Rockin's father, fourth son Mu Jingxiao's eyes instantly reddened. What are you doing? Mu Qingya sobbed softly and looked at Matriarch Mu with tears in her eyes. Mother, don't worry about us. The Mu family's talisman fragments can't be handed over, and the Mu family's dignity can't be lost. It's our honor to die for the Mu family. Slap! This time, the heavenly fate disciples who were grabbing the women became even angrier. One of them directly slapped Mu Qingya in the face and even tore the clothes on her shoulders. We want to see just how tough the Mu family's mouth is. Such a delicate and fair madam. It's really embarrassing to reward her to us brothers. Ha 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 ha. Following the strange laughter, Mu Qingya's tears fell one by one. But she still tightly pursed her lips and put on an unyielding look. She lowered her head and refused to make a sound. Qingya. Matriarch Mu's heart softened immediately. Qingya, this child, had been working hard for the Mu family for so many years. She had taken care of the family's affairs from top to bottom. Such a gentle and kind-hearted child. How could she bear to watch her suffer like this? Arbor suddenly sneered. How long are you going to act? Acting every day, deceiving this and that. After deceiving so many people for so many years, I just want to ask you, is it tiring to live like this? See you tomorrow. Chapter 4069. The surroundings were silent, except for Arbor's faint questioning voice. There was no other sound. Inexplicably, many of the Mu family's disciples seemed to have even lightened their breathing a little. They could clearly feel that the little crown princess's mood was fluctuating like a violent storm. Although she still looked expressionless, the depths of her almond-shaped eyes had long been dyed with a roaring fury. Mu Qingya raised her head with tears in her eyes and looked at Arbor strangely. She looked around with a puzzled expression and put on an expression that said, Are you talking to me? Clap, clap, clap. Arbor's little face was expressionless as she clapped hard. I was too naive. I didn't know there was someone with such superb acting skills in this world. In the most prosperous opera house in the imperial capital, the most famous entertainer's acting ability is not even 100,000th of First Madam's. The first time you ordered to clean up the Mu family, you didn't get the talisman remnant scroll. You were very unwilling, right? It's only been a few days, and now there's another wave. Arbor shook her little head and stared at Mu Qingya indifferently. Do you think this crown princess can't do anything to that Mammy Wang who killed herself by swallowing poison? With a wave of her little hand, she grabbed a faint remnant soul in her hand and tossed it around casually. Does First Madam still know this person? The Mu family disciples looked in Mu Qingya's direction in bewilderment. What was going on? According to the Crown Prince Consort's meaning, the Mu family's calamity this time was actually First Madam ordered to come to the Mu family to search for the talisman remnant scroll? Who was First Madam? Who could she order? The group of people who broke into the Mu family's old residence were all members of the Tianyun cult. Could it be that First Madam? Everyone's eyes involuntarily shrank, including Old Master Mu Tsong, and they all looked in First Madam Mu's direction in disbelief. Mu Qingya couldn't help but turn pale and her body swayed. Jojo, what do you mean? Do you think that a weak woman like me can give any orders? Everyone came back to their senses when they heard this. That's right. First Madam was just an ordinary person. She was just an ordinary housewife. Who could she give orders to in Tianyun? What ability did she have to do such a thing? Just thinking about it made it seem impossible. Could it be that the crown princess had misunderstood something? Or perhaps he had thought wrongly. The little crown princess applauded again and shook the remnant soul of Nanny Wang in her hand. This is your woman, First Madam. Don't tell me you don't know her. Mu Qingya looked at Arbor with a pitiful expression, and tears fell uncontrollably. Jojo, please believe me. I grew up in the Mu family, was born in the Mu family, was raised in the Mu family, and ate and used everything in the Mu family. The Mu family has treated me so well that I can't betray them. Matriarch Mu nodded and also persuaded. That's true. Jojo, what do you mean by that? First Madam's wife is just a weak housewife. What orders can she give and who can she order to do things? Husband. Arbor rolled his eyes, looking like he couldn't be bothered to say more to them. Emolien couldn't help but want to laugh. She walked up and held her little hand. Chapter 40-70. The little girl had said less than 3 sentences, but she already felt like she had said everything she wanted to say. It was really funny. Emolien turned to look at Madame Mu and said in a low voice, "Bring her here. Soon." An old nanny in green clothes was gagged. Her shoulders kept twisting as she was pushed and escorted over. Mu Qingya glanced at the old woman, but her expression didn't change at all. Her gaze toward Xiao Mu was still gentle and benevolent, but it also contained a bit of helplessness and bewilderment. It was as if an elder could unreasonably condone the younger generation's unreasonable behavior. She sighed softly. Nanny Qiu, who was beside her, glanced at the little crown princess but didn't say anything. The maid, Song Lu, couldn't help but yell angrily, "Crown princess, our madam is so good to you and always thinks of you. She doesn't dare to neglect you in anything. How can you do this? Can you just find 2 old maids who are not familiar with her to slander her? Since we've brought them here, it means we have complete evidence." Aoyi kicked the nanny in the back of her knee, causing her to kneel on the ground in pain. She flopped and fell at Arbor's feet. Madame Mu should be very familiar with this Zhang Huilan. Aoyi smiled faintly and kicked the woman. "Madame Mu, why don't you take a closer look?" Madame Mu's expression was cold. She glanced at Nanny Zhang from the corner of her eyes and shook her head. "I don't know this person and I don't know what you're talking about." Arbor looked at her with a frosty expression for a long time before saying faintly, "You've already exposed your identity. Tianyun, Fei Tian, Hall Master Mu Qingya." Xiao Mu tossed a confession certificate in front of her, allowing it to flutter to Mu Qingya's feet. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Song Lu was furious. She pointed at the sharp blade pressed against her neck. "Don't you see what this is? Tianyun's people broke into our Mu clan and captured us. But now you... Stop acting." Emolien interrupted Song Lu's words and did not even look at the other party. He stared at Mu Qingya for a long time before nodding with a smile. "The Hall Master of the Soaring Heavens Hall is indeed very capable. You didn't waste your years of painstaking effort and hiding in the Mu family. Zhang Huilan is the spy you placed in the Long family. I've always found it strange. When did the Long family branch in the imperial capital surrender to the Heavenly Fate Empire? So it turns out that everything is related to your operation." Mu Qingya looked at Emolien in astonishment. She tightly gripped the handkerchief in her hand, and with tears in her eyes, she asked in confusion, "Your Highness, why do you say that? Stop pretending." Xiao Mu was so disgusted by her that she abruptly pulled her husband behind her. She glared at Mu Qingya in disdain and said, "Don't use your little white face to look at Xiao Qiao's lotus. It's disgusting." Nanny Qiu supported Mu Qingya, who was on the verge of collapsing, and said in a low voice, "Crown Princess, please be careful with your words. Ever since you returned to the Mu clan in the Divine Province, ask yourself honestly, has Madame Mu ever mistreated you? Madame Mu treats your mother with the utmost sincerity. Even biological sisters can't be better." Nanny Qiu said coldly. Chapter 40-71. Do you know that First Madam even used the Yen Shang technique to curse Long Shouxin, the head of the Long family, for your mother's sake? How could she be the head of the Tianyun Hall? How could she help the Long family escape from the capital? Crown Princess, you have a deep misunderstanding about First Madam, Nanny Qiu said in a deep voice. I know that I can't explain it to you in a short time, but please believe in one thing. First Madam absolutely has no ill intentions towards your deceased mother and you. Keep pretending. Keep pretending. Arbor's lips curved slightly, as if there was a crack at the corner of his mouth, and he smiled eerily. Mu Qingya, why don't we put all the things you've done one by one? Let's start with Shi Huixin being your scapegoat. What do you think? First Madam Mu slowly raised her head, looking as gentle as ever. Although there was a knife on her neck, half of the clothes on her shoulders were torn, and her hair was a little messy, her eyes were clear. She still looked like the calm First Madam who was standing in the back hall of the Mu family's courtyard, and the madam in charge of the whole family. Arbor's eyes flickered, and he couldn't help but applaud her elegant demeanor. Mu Qingya, you probably didn't expect that a little girl from a small village in the Lower Star region would be out of your control. When you found out, you suddenly felt that everything was out of control and deviated from the original track. There was no way to set things right. Arbor tilted his head, and there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. He looked at her and said word by word, I, Arbor, have returned to the divine land. The disciples of the Mu family fixed their eyes on the little crown princess and stared at her deeply. For a moment they felt speechless. You've been scheming against me since the first day I set foot in the divine land. It's not what you think. Chow Chow, you truly have a deep misunderstanding about me. Mu Qingya wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. She wanted to explain herself, but Xiao Mu cut her off. I didn't misunderstand you. When I learned that you were the hall master of the heavenly fortune soaring heavens hall, who I've only heard of but never seen in person, I was shocked. Xiao Mu turned around and suddenly smiled sweetly at Mu Qingya. Her smile was unhurried, like a snow jade lotus that had suddenly bloomed. It was cold and exquisite, making it nearly impossible for people to avert their eyes. I went through all the things in my heart. Mu Qingya pointed at her heart and said slowly, You're really amazing. I've suspected you more than once, but every time you managed to escape successfully. You gave me the feeling that you're a perfect person. Gentle, skilled, noble, and even flawless. Mu Qingya's assess heart. Mu Qingya looked at her with tears in her eyes. Tears fell one after another, and she reached out to cover her heart. She's. You and I both know Shi Huixin's identity very well. Xiao Mu gazed at her deeply. The probability of pulling off so many petty tricks under the nose of the matriarch of the household, who has been managing the Mu clan for so many years, is practically zero. Chapter 4072. Shi Huixin could actually bring that fake Xiao Yingchun back to the Mu family. This can only mean one thing. Arbor looked at Mu Qingya expressionlessly. You knew from the beginning. No, you should know very well whether it was true or not. Arbor looked at her silently and stared at her deeply. From the beginning, Shi Huixin was just a small chess piece in your hand. It was you who wanted to ruin this old consort's reputation. It was you who manipulated that fake Xiao Yingchun behind the scenes and let her enter the Mu family smoothly. You even arranged for her to step into the social circle of the nobles. Her pitch-black eyes fell into the depths of Mu Qingya's rippling eyes. They swayed like two crescents of clear spring water, chilling to the bone. At that moment, she seemed to see that person in the little girl. Cold, elegant, and incomparably arrogant. She humbly crawled at the feet of that person and listened to others telling her that this was the eldest miss of the Long family and the future mistress of the Mu family. That woman's clear and frosty eyes fell on her. At that moment, she felt as if she had fallen into the depths of the dust, so weak that she was even less than an ant. To be honest, she really hated this feeling of having to kneel and look up to others. She hated it very, very much. Mu Qingya's memory flowed slowly with the waves and finally stopped at a certain point. Nanny Cho bowed to her and whispered, Madame, concubine Shi has already brought her here according to our arrangements. Madame Mu curled her lips and revealed a faint light in the corners of her eyes. Tomorrow, at the banquet at General Zhongli's residence, Mu Qingya stroked a soft strand of hair by her temples. I'm not feeling well tomorrow. Yes, madam. Nanny Cho smiled faintly and bowed 2 steps back. Then tomorrow, let that idiot take that fake to General Zhongli's residence to meet the nobles in the imperial court. Mu Qingya nodded faintly and said softly, That's good. Mu Qingya looked at the arbor in front of her indifferently. She was lost in thought for a long time and didn't say anything. Her eyes revealed a faint sigh and a faint sadness. All of this is just your guess, Mrs. Mu said softly. How can you prove that I did such a thing? Jojo, if I do this, what good will it do for me? Child, it's not good for your health to think too much. Arbor ignored her and continued. After that, I returned to the Mu family. On the surface, you seem to take care of everything and treat me and the crown prince respectfully. Do you need me to remind you of what you did behind my back? What did I do? Mu Qingya looked at Arbor innocently and couldn't help but laugh at herself. I didn't do anything, okay? That Xiao Xing is one of your people, Arbor coldly said. As soon as I entered the Mu family, you started to make things difficult for me. Crown Princess. Mu Qingya looked helpless. I really didn't know that you still remember Xiao Xing's matter. Of course I remember. She even turned into a zombie. She turned into a zombie and almost attacked my people. Mu Jingfeng. Arbor pointed at the dumbstruck Mu Jingfeng. Mu Jingfeng even tried his best to absolve you, saying that this matter had nothing to do with you. Chapter 4073. But how did a perfectly fine person suddenly turn into a corpse in the woodshed? There's no need to say how many improved potions the hall master of Tianyun's Soaring Heavens Hall has, right? Is what she said true? Mu Jingfeng finally regained his senses. His hair was disheveled and covered in blood as he stared at Mu Qingya, who had a knife at her neck. Is what she said true? Of course not. Mu Qingya let out a long sigh. I'm just a weak woman. How can I be the hall master of the Heavenly Fortune Club? Jingfeng, we've been husband and wife for so many years. I do hate you for forcing me against my will back then. But all these years, what I've done for you, what I've done for the entire Mu family, what I've sacrificed over 10 years of my youth, what I've done for this family. Can't you see it? As Mu Qingya spoke, her eyes flickered with tears, as if she had suffered a great grievance. Her expression was abnormally miserable. However, Mu Jingfeng took a step back and glanced at her with a trembling gaze. He realized that he really couldn't understand this wife of his who had shared a bed with him for so many years. Old master, old madam. Mu Qingya looked at the 2 elders with tears in her eyes. Even you 2 believe it? You believe that I'm a member of that evil cult? You believe that I, Mu Qingya, have done anything to let down the Mu family? Old madam heaved a long sigh, and her gaze swept toward Xiao Mu. Xiao, is there a misunderstanding? There's no misunderstanding, Arbor said indifferently. She had never thought that these people from the Mu family would stand by her side. Nor did she think that someone from the Mu family would be able to stand by her side. But no matter what, right was right and wrong was wrong. Since she already knew this woman's true colors, how could she not expose her? Mu Qingya, you've indeed pretended very well. You've deceived so many people for so many years. Today, regardless of whether anyone believes me or not, you won't be able to escape death. Arbor said coldly as he looked at her with a sharp gaze. Eldest miss, I believe you. Suddenly, a Mu family disciple with a bandage on his arm spoke up. Eldest young miss, I also believe in you. Another Mu clan disciple nodded heavily and said, There's no need for eldest miss to lie to us. Yes, eldest miss risked her life to save our Mu family. There's no need for her to lie to us. Ma Shurchin raised her eyebrows slightly and revealed a faint smile. It seemed that these younger generation Mu family disciples were not stupid to the point of being incurable. Mu Xingchen turned to look at his younger sister, then at the group of youths from the Mu family who were still in high spirits even though they were covered in injuries. He couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. Arbor turned around expressionlessly and looked at Mu Qingya. After little Xing turned into a zombie, you cooperated with Nye Yaoguang to spread rumors. They said that monsters appeared in the Mu clan because the crown princess, the source of the disaster, had returned to the divine land. Mu Qingya turned her head slightly and looked coldly at the little crown princess. It's a pity that this rumor was suppressed by me before it could spread. Your plan failed again. Arbor looked coldly at Mu Qingya. After that, you also know what happened to Juxian and Meixian. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.